Okay, welcome to our workshop this evening for the Design Review Board, talking about Reston, what do you call it, RCTP or whatever heck it is? The Reston Town Center North, RTCN. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Tim Sampson. I represent Inova Health System. Dave Sittler, my colleague, also on behalf of Inova, Joan Beecham. I think many of you know Fairfax County. Stephanie Pankowitz is our landscape architect from Land Design. Pete Crawford from Urban Engineering is a civil engineer. We were here with you last February 20th, I believe, and presented for information purposes a presentation at a high level, but of what we had submitted to Fairfax County back over last summer, and have been started to work through with the county team in the regulatory process. And what we described to you, was a high-level plan for what we're talking about as a Phase 1 zoning effort for Reston Town Center North. I'm not going to repeat all I did last time, by the way, just a quick summary. Which was, as its foundation, proposing a grid of streets organized around a central green space. Town green is the kind of key organizing feature of the site. And because of the ownership structure that exists between Inova and Fairfax County now, we were undertaking this initial phase of the zoning in order to be able to subdivide the property and clear up some boundary lines that are otherwise very overlapping and confusing, and not overlapping, but just not coherent with respect to further development. And so importantly, what those applications do not propose, right, is anything within the blocks that are being created by the grid of streets. And so we talked last time, got some initial feedback from you all, and some of that feedback was kind of struck at the foundational aspects of the grid of streets premise. And so I think by the end of that conversation, the then chair had suggested that we maybe have a work session and use that as a more informal effort to describe, where we had come from and where we are and where we're going. And so that's, I think, in my mind, the purpose of our effort here tonight. And so the presentation tonight is far less, formal, really, and is meant to just kind of encourage conversation and hopefully further our discussion about what I think is a very important site, and I think we all certainly would agree about that. So the slide we have up here really is extremely basic, and it puts the site in context. And I think part of what I had submitted a letter to you all in March, I think, describing some of the planning context that we had been in with the site, because I was looking back, it's been 8 years since May of 2010, believe it or not, that we began engaging the Reston task force and its subcommittees with respect to this property. And there was, at the county's information, there was 200-something meetings and 50 people on that task force. And through all those years and all that process, we certainly had the feeling like there was a large community participation in that. And what came out of that process, had a long way to go, but at least its foundational aspects were something that had been vetted fairly thoroughly through the community process. And what that discussion entailed really was a plan that talked about several key aspects for this site and the others in proximity to the metro, right, which was urban design, transportation connectivity, urban parks and open spaces, and public facilities. And this site, I think, uniquely to all others, given the county's involvement here and Innova's involvement too, really to a substantial extent, has the opportunity to be that civic presence at Reston Town Center that many projects don't have the opportunity to be, and I think it's something that really sets this apart and makes it a unique opportunity. So those planning principles, I think, came out of the context that we're depicting on the graphic here, which is you see the site in proximity to the developed core of Reston Town Center that is around it on nearly all sides. And the next slide, if you would, is a three-dimensional representation of the same idea. And this includes buildings that aren't there yet, but that are approved up at the Spectrum development, which is to plan right to the east of our property there toward the top of the map. and includes proposed buildings down more consistent with the current recommendations of the comprehensive plan closer to the metro station. And this, again, for us, helps set the context of the site there in the framework of a very urban environment. And I think, again, that framework in the urban environment is where the recommendations of the Reston Task Force and ultimately reflected in the comprehensive plan come from. The next slide is a similar perspective, but from the looking east rather than west, northeast, and again, nothing really more to say, just more context for how the site has to begin to fit in with the things around it. The next slide then is a representation of, back to plan view here, the aerial of the connectivity that exists in pink or red there around the site with the major thoroughfares. Obviously, that's not every street, but the main streets in the existing grid. And then the blue represents the idea of how this site and others and the grid would begin to continue through the Reston town center area to provide that north-south link that goes right through this site all the way down, through to Sunset Hills and further to the metro, and then also the crossing there depicted of the toll road at Town Center Parkway. The east-west connections are drawn out here because they relate to the spectrum development that is approved to the east. And again, as we go to the next slide, really just continuing to layer. This is then the development plan that we have put together, the blocks that result, and that, again, for context purposes, helps depict where we came from in this grid of streets concept. There are locations all around the site that need to be connected to. Those points of connection exist and will be continued into the future with the redevelopment of spectrum, and it provides a fairly limited range of opportunity to connect into that from a land planning process. Next graphic again is the same thing, just at a different scale, so that we can begin to again see, and this would be reminiscent of what you saw last time, of what we filed. And what what I don't like about this screen is and I didn't have this perception until after we spoke last time. We've been so focused on how does this plan meet the objective of connecting to the things that are built around it now and that will be built around it into the future, and orient itself around that key feature of the green, so that we can get to a place where we can separate these parcels as between Inova and the county and move toward the next phase of figuring out what's on the blocks and where the civic uses are going to go and where the other uses are going to go. And it occurred to me later that image just depicts nothing for all those blocks. And while I've got 8 years of thoughts in my mind about what may be sitting there, you folks have none, or a much more limited scope of it. And it leaves itself not presenting very well. And it suggests, or seems to suggest, that we're coming in at the beginning, putting those streets in, wiping everything out, and then someday coming and building back. And that's not the intention at all. And I think that may have been, a poor choice of presentation on our part that led to, a disconnect on really what we're doing next. So the proposal we have, to be clear, and again, it jumped out at me. This thought jumped out at me because in the memo we got from you all after our February meeting, there was a statement in there to the effect that the proposal was to take all of the trees internal to the site out, the existing trees, and that's not the case, right? It may look like it's the case based on that graphic, and that's what caught me after the fact. What the proposal is that, and I believe the next slide will help this, right? Is that this is the clearing kind of grading graphic with respect to the roads, right? And the roads wouldn't go all in at once anyway. They would go in a phased effort because there's existing buildings out there. But even if the roads went in all at a time, all at one time, you can tell that there's resulting existing areas of vegetation on the site that would exist until there's a time to have a conversation about what's developed next on the block. And critically, And we've been working, a bit with the RA staff along the way here too, trying to identify priority areas of existing vegetation. And the ones that have been identified to us are those areas on the plan left, in the C areas, that are, just to make sure, this is a little hard to describe with words, but these tree areas here, right? And they relate to the same type of existing forest land on the other side of the Edgewater Park that is proposed to be saved. And as you can tell in his graphic, it's, again, even if the grid of streets went in, substantially all of those areas of tree save would remain. And what then happens is, so again, to emphasize that point, the current proposal is not to eliminate all the trees. The current proposal is to provide for a grid of streets that will connect where they need to connect, but respect the existing vegetation to the extent it can and preserve what would remain. Then what follows, so that's kind of like, there's the where we've been and where we are. What comes next? What comes next is a process for each one of these blocks. As development is identified on those blocks, a program for development is identified on those blocks, where we're back in front of you all and having a conversation about how development within those blocks fits with the existing vegetation that's there, with the other features that may be there. And our last slides are going to depict, actually there's one more. This slide depicts the grade. There's about a 60-foot grade fall from east to west across the site, and that answers why those middle lines represent roughly the location of the central green. That's roughly, that's why the central green, one of the reasons why the central green has a north-south axis rather than east-west axis. Our next slides are vignettes to depict the concept that I know you're familiar with around Reston, right, of where there are mature stands of trees that are incorporated in the areas of new development. And these aren't to say that these are what these buildings are going to look like, or they may not fit here at all. The concept is very urban form can happen on a site with blocks that will have resulting tree save, as these blocks will. And that's a conversation that you all will be very involved in as those blocks come in for development. And the last slide depicts the similar condition. I know you're familiar with the President's Park, I believe it's called, there on Reston Avenue, and with the large Boston Properties building that has come up right next to it, and I think did a good job of maintaining an existing vegetation condition adjacent to it, as well as some of the properties across Reston Avenue there, the Stratford House and Carlton House. So again, we're not at a point of designing buildings on that site, and we're not at a point of being able to say where a building would lay out, because again, it's likely neither ANOVA nor the county are going to be the developers of those sites. But what we're hoping to put together is a plan where there is, even with the infrastructure pieces that go in, there is substantial tree save that remains, and that there's a conversation that happens at the time that those other sites come in for development applications about how to work with those resources. And I will say, we're in a difficult place in some extent by having kind of little information about what comes next. It's hard to answer questions with a great deal of specificity. We do know, and we're confident saying, that we will meet or exceed the county's preservation targets for tree preservation on this site, and that does require tree save within these blocks, in addition to the tree save that's contemplated at Edgewater Park. And so that really, and I'm glad I kept it to relatively short time frame, is all I wanted to do to preface a conversation, and then seek a dialogue with you all and input on your thoughts on this and moving forward. I do think that we feel I think very strongly constrained, if that's the right way to put it, by the comprehensive plan. I mean, and the grid of streets does sit in the comprehensive plan, and we think it sits there for for good reasons and for a lot of the different reasons that I heard articulated at the beginning and had been vetted thoroughly throughout the planning discussions for that site. And the ability to change from this kind of grid that connects other places and has transportation impacts and all that, it would be a very difficult thing to accomplish. So
That's
I'd
it?
be glad to answer questions, be glad to
Sure.
dialogue
Yeah.
however you want.
Yeah, I had just a couple of things. You keep referring to the task force and the Reston master plan and so on. I'd just like to point out, in neither of those cases was any member of this board allowed to be on either or any of those boards. And so we're kind of catching up now. I think it was a sort of major omission to not have included us. They included a lot of developers and some people from the P&Z committee, panel, whatever they're called, but none from here. And I think that was a huge oversight. And that's why I think you're hearing from us what sounds like you've been doing this for 8 years. What are we talking about now? It's the first time we've been part of this, including the task force, the comprehensive plan, everything else. No one ever asked us. And we're kind of charged with doing what we can to make or keep Reston a fun place to be and a nice place to live. So that said, I guess the one question I have is, after the meeting we had last time, there were an awful lot of comments about your grid of streets, the tree save, yada, 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 what's coming. I understand you don't know what's coming. But what have you done in response to any of the comments we made? So far, I haven't heard anything, except you're probably going to save some trees. So the plan is going to stay, none of the comments we made about that, the streets running through the park, the whole long list of things we did for an hour when we talked before. Can you just clarify what you've done in response to that, or is it just nothing?
Well, no, I think that we evaluated, well, we can go through the list, right? But the streets running through the park were something that we did evaluate from again, a traffic circulation perspective, and I think there's a concern about that from a traffic flow perspective. What we can do design-wise with respect to those streets and have proposed in the plan is a raised crossing of the park that obviously slows traffic down in those areas and can be on a periodic basis, closed for events that may want to connect the aspects of the park. But we did look at that, and the circulation challenges it presents by cutting those off were challenging.
So in response to what we spent an hour talking about last time,
Well,
we haven't done anything except maybe save some trees, maybe, and put a raised crossing. That's it? That's your whole response to an hour's worth of our comments?
when
I'm not trying to stick you with this, but I'm just like, I thought you'd come back with, well, we thought about what you said, and here's some ideas.
When we discussed last time, and we left not understanding how to respond to what we were given to think about in the context of a plan that we consider a baseline that we have to start from, and what I thought the part of the purpose of this conversation tonight was to understand further your all's thoughts about, if there were specific, I mean, honestly, when we were talking about work session, I had in my mind, and I think somebody may have said, an idea of, sketching and this sort of thing. Now, the format of this doesn't lend itself to that, but we were hoping to have this conversation to better understand what aspects of the design you thought would be modified to better suit the vision that you were articulating.
Okay, well, just a question would be, what are you guys doing with this that would make this development, because that's what it'll end up being, more a part of Reston and RA, as opposed to something that's way more like Town Center, which isn't part of RA? And since this is RA property, or we have purview over it, what would you be suggesting that would make that happen, and not just is going to be an extension of Town Center, which is what it looks like to me?
I think that the challenge, I mean, if you go back, if you would, to those 3D images, right? The challenge that we have is fitting this in the context of its surrounding neighborhood, right? Which is kind of that's part of the charge of all of us. And I think there's, maybe there's a definitional aspect here of what's the neighborhood. I think it's a site that, given that existing surrounding condition, is different than a site that may be elsewhere in Reston and more subject to the type of design parameters that you're considering. I think that we can, I think that the answer is to find a way to, and that's why I focus so much on the tree save. I mean, that's what I heard as the, what I heard, I think we all heard, as the driving, the common denominator behind the comments we were receiving was that the layout didn't allow for the site to address the existing trees that were there and those features of the site. And so if you, and so the response then is that we took another level of this to get so further along in the engineering to look at which aspects of the site in particular would be affected and which aspects could then be considered for to target to save.
All right, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So basically, we're going to have to sort of accept the overall plan and concept from what you're saying because you're very reticent to change it. So let me just ask another question then. Is there any place in here, it seems pretty developer friendly, fine, but is there anywhere in here you think something like the Lake Ann development might happen to where you had something that really was architecturally interesting, was more like Reston, had a water feature or not, who's to say, but some lower level kind of things, and maybe, is that possible in your scenario here, or is that just not going to ever happen?
I don't, you'll have to, if you would, explain, what you mean more by the Lake Ann example. I mean, I think what this is...
A lower scale.
What the...
I was just trying to answer your question, that's all.
Sorry.
That's all right.
No, go ahead.
No, you got the mic. Carry on.
The concept that's articulated in the comprehensive plan is for a tapering of intensity, right, from south to north and from east to west. And I think that you can see with that image where that's coming from, right? And so I think I was going to try to answer the question about scale and context in that regard, right? That's the recommendation, and that's what would we expect to play out during these future phases of this.
How about like on the western border, for example, across the street there's a pond, small lake, whatever you want to call it, and 2- and 3-story buildings there. Do you feel that some of this development needs to relate to that and be much lower scale, or are you seeing all of this development equaling town center?
It certainly isn't equaling town center. No, I think it's something that has to evolve as those phases come. I mean, and if there's a recommendation from this board that those are the things to consider, then we'll take that recommendation. But that's a phase beyond where we're at. I don't disagree with you. I think it's something that needs to be studied in the design, and it's something that needs to be studied in the context of the development program. Coming as well, because if it depends, because the public uses are up there. I don't know.
And a whole bunch of other people up here. Let's see what they can. Got any comments, thoughts, questions?
I do have a few. This is Reston purview. That's why you're here with the DRB, and the DRB did not participate in the master plan. And the master plan is a guideline. It's not a mandatory. It's basically a set of guidelines in terms of how development would take place in various aspects of Reston. I think that's important to keep in mind, that it's a roadmap, nothing more. It's not your instructions as to how you're going to build the model. I respect that you're saying you're protecting trees, but if I could bring up a better visual, you could go to that tab. Browser.
Take a mic with you.
You can go back to their graphic. Yeah, give me a mic. I'll just leave it be. There are several blocks where there are significant mature trees. And I respect when you threw in the grading thing, the grading slide with regard to the trying to minimize the impact of the trees. But needless to say, when you look at many of those blocks, I wish we had a better visual here.
You go to the road network.
A few more slides. There's.
Yeah, but that's
Keep
even
going.
poor. That's even
Keep
poor.
going. One more, I think.
Yeah.
There you go.
But still, that doesn't show it. I had a visual of what is really there, and the amount of trees on most of those blocks. Let me carry this mic. I'm sorry, folks. This is important to me. This block here is almost all mature trees. Mature trees here, mature trees in a lot of these areas. I see what you're trying to protect, but when you see the block definition, that is ripe for development. And what you're doing is you're putting in a park, which is basically in today's world, nothing more than asphalt and concrete and about 12 to 24 trees of various sizes right through the middle. And what you're intending to do is to take all that concrete and asphalt in an existing building and turn it into a park. Whereas if I were building a park, I would say, this is a beautiful area for a park. This is a beautiful area for a park. This is a beautiful area for a park, given the amount of mature trees that are here. And so if you're saying that we are stuck with this tic-tac-toe grid line of streets, then I'd say you've lacked a significant amount of creativity and innovation to say, how can we salvage and leverage what Mother Nature has given us? This is sort of the purview of living in Reston. Make it blend. Make nature blend into what you're building. And protect the open spaces and turn those into parks. Why does this have to be the park? And why do the streets have to go this way? I understand from a traffic flow standpoint that there may be an engineering response to that. But from a Reston standpoint, I say you're really defeating the purpose here. You're turning basically this area, if you look at it on Bing Maps or Google Maps, it's nothing but an asphalt road, parking lots, and an existing building. And your intent is to turn that into a park. I just don't understand that. When all the ingredients to the park are all around you. And you still have an opportunity to develop right in here. It's already concrete and asphalt. Put in your buildings there. In terms of creativity, it's zero on my scale. And from a Reston perspective, and from our standpoint as a design review board, our mission is to see how we can make sure that what is being developed blends into the existing environment and doesn't impact the environment that surrounds it. And right now, this one just seems like you're going to scour where it doesn't need to be scoured and plant where it's already scoured. It just boggles my mind.
Thank you for sharing those comments. I'm Stephanie Penkwicks. I was the landscape architect who presented the park plan on the February presentation. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I totally agree with you. The park is going to be replacing what right now is concrete or buildings. We are looking to plant more trees. There are areas of green space, fire retention, stormwater management. So there's a tremendous amount of benefits that will actually happen in that.
You didn't answer the question, though.
From environmental. So I was just addressing the question about, or the comment about what the park would be replacing or being mostly concrete.
You're replacing basically concrete and asphalt with the intent to go green a little bit, whereas Mother Nature has given you 200 years of significant green all around it, which you intend to devour for buildings. Why not put the buildings into center and taper out and protect all of those gorgeous trees and shrubs? It's just mind-boggling.
Well, part of, there's several things. I mean, your characterization of what the comprehensive plan means and how it's supposed to guide us, is not, I don't agree with, right? I think that the way the comprehensive plan works in Fairfax County, it is not an ordinance. You're correct in that respect, but it is held up with far greater, I don't know what the word is, regard than the way you described it. The county expects that when a developer comes in with a zoning application or a development plan, that the development plan that's proposed is going to substantially conform to what is set forth in the comprehensive plan. I mean, that's the whole vision in the county for how the planning and the zoning works together. And
I'm going to have to interrupt you because this is a workshop. We all understand what you're going to say about how the comprehensive plan works and why it's important. I would rather get some other comments from the people up here so you have more of an idea. Like I think Ken's point about you have natural parks already. Why are you tearing those down and building a rather concrete park in the middle? Let's move on and let other people give their comments, and then we'll get back to you and you can respond. How about that?
Okay.
Otherwise, because we got 23 minutes left.
Okay.
So let's start. Charlie?
Well, not the only concern, I have a concern over with your grid pattern. What do we have in writing that we can expect that you are really going to build high at this south end, tapering down to low at the northwest corner? Is there anything in writing that's going to guarantee us that if we approve the grid, that in fact is what we're going to see 10 years from now?
That's the language in the comprehensive plan. That's what we are trying to. That's what we're trying to meet. So it's clearly our expectation. It's the regulatory expectation of the county that will happen, and that is what's stated in the comprehensive plan now.
That specifically for your plot of land,
Yes.
this is what we will see.
Yes, the expectation is for a tapering of I can't remember if it's height, density, and whatever it is.
Well, it'd be probably a combination of both, I would assume.
From the south to the north and the east to the west.
Okay. Bruce?
Yeah, no, I think, I went back to the plan to see what the constraints are. And consistent with what's been said here and what you're saying is, to me, one of the greatest challenges is that it has something for everybody. So it's inherently inconsistent. It has a picture of the concept that you suggest. It also says very clearly that there's supposed to be a adequate recreation, not just passive recreation, active recreation. So, just by way of an example, and it talks about maintaining the canopy, and it talks about a transition. So it has something for everybody. So in that context, I believe my approach, and I can't speak for everyone here, is that we're going to apply the principles that we apply to anything in Reston, because right here you have, with certain limitations, I recognize it's transitional, but I object to the notion that transitional means very urban, because by definition, we are transitioning to things that aren't very urban. So this area, I approach this with the notion that it is not very urban, it is transition. And I'm going to review this in that context too, recognizing that there was a grid of streets in the master plan, but it doesn't necessarily have to be as it was conceptually presented. But I'm also going to recognize that those other things I mentioned about recreation and canopy and transition to the residential area is respected as well.
Okay. Let us have our run out of time. Neil?
So I'm kind of taking myself back to where I was when you guys were last in here, and at the time I was thinking that this was a kind of a 1980s urban town center study like we might have done in school when I was in school, and it would have gotten a solid B maybe in that time and place. The idea of the park in the middle, and then the grid of streets has been big for the last 25, 30 years. I mean, town center itself comes out of that period of design. When we sit and we review the little village centers, we will have small areas with picnic tables that the designers refer to as a plaza. And when you guys come in and you have a widened street parallel streets with a bit of green in the middle, and you call it a park. And I suppose that that's as good a name as maybe any. So when I look at this, I think, consistent with what Bruce was just saying, I think you can meet the grid of streets. I think you can meet the passive recreation. I just think there should be more of the park and less of the buildable area that's left over. And you can see the economics at play here, the developable blocks between the partners that are doing this work. And that makes it more likely to happen, and it sets up the money that'll help make it happen. But for my money, and I started to say twice, if the park was 3 times the size that it is, if it were a real place, and if it were a real counterpart to Reston Town Center, and I think it just does look like more of Town Center. And I don't know that we need, I'm speaking like someone that knows this. From my perspective, living in Reston and sitting on this board, I can't feel the need for all of that additional development so much as I can feel the need for some real green space in this part of Reston, where Town Center is hardscape, and it's wonderful hardscape, and it's a great place to be, but doubling the amount of Town Center-like hard space with this sliver of an urban park, to me, is not meeting the goals that Reston has for things that we review. There should be much more emphasis on the green aspects. And I'm not just talking about tree save, and I differ from Ken a little bit on that. Lots of Reston was pasture 50, 60 years ago. Trees do grow, they do fill in. I think you need to preserve your economic development plan, but I think you could do that and still give us a whole lot more park. That's my one big input.
So clarify, it's the dimension of the central green that is the driving thing here?
I'd like to, my mental image of how I'd be designing it, there would be an overlay of the romantic Olmstedian landscape with the grid of streets. And you get that actually in Central Park, with the way pedestrian and car paths interact or don't interact, as the case may be. There could be something like that perhaps, or maybe not like that exactly, but again, you could preserve the cross connections through the site and meet your grid and your transportation and congestion and serviceability goals, it seems to me. And then overlay on top of that a park that had a little more natural, romantic quality to it that wasn't quite so Beaux-Arts. It was just a little more Reston. When we talk about Lake Anne, I think we're talking about things that are just slightly more eccentric and inventive, that aren't just about developing large blocks of developable office and retail space. It's about this does read like leftover space. It's figural, but it's the leftover. It's not what this is all about. What this is mostly about is the development, and it needs to be, I get that. But since we're sitting here as a partner in this, I'd like to push for more of the green aspects that the comprehensive plan also supports.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, I think back to the comprehensive plan argument about tree preservation, I think it's a little disingenuous to say that this grid of streets with the tree preservation is meeting that goal, because we know that when you come back in with these various block plans, there's no economics that's going to work to have tree preservation within those leftover areas. So I think you're picking and choosing from what part of the comp plan you're trying to honor. You say we have to do the grid of streets, but you're saying we don't have to do all the tree preservation. I think that's a little misleading to everyone here. I think Neil said it really well with the Olmstedian feel of this design, though. Is there a way to make it more romantic and more Reston-like? If you ever walk around anywhere outside of town center, you're moving, you're strolling, you're going on curves, you're going up and down. The park design and the grid just doesn't feel like Reston to me. I think that's the biggest issue I have right now. I understand the economics, the development and making this work, but I think that's a challenge, is to integrate this stuff, and I don't think it's at that level at this point. I think there is a solution. We're just not seeing it yet.
Well, You know, let me say, this is challenging enough. So I regret that any of what I said seems disingenuous and misleading to folks. I think that Mr. Ramo's point resonated strongly with me. The comprehensive plan has a little bit of everything dumped in on this site. You know, we often refer to it as the 10 pounds of comprehensive plan in a 5-pound bag the site is. It's supposed to be a school site. It's supposed to be a fire station. It's supposed to be a library and a community center and an aquatic center, and have a large central green, and have tree save and a grid of streets, and it needs to have, you know, an urban feel that provides for real development. It's got to have retail in it, and it needs an economic engine to make all of that happen. And that isn't going to happen, right? We know that's not going to happen. What we're trying to do, and it's not about picking and choosing. I'm trying to figure out how to find the place where as much of that vision can come together, and we can find the common denominator for that to occur. And so a statement about we need to rely on a grid of streets, there is resulting tree save. I mean, I was trying to provide both, not, you know, suggest that one, you know, we were following one lead instead of the other. It's a very difficult thing to make all of these things mesh. I think the feedback that we've gotten so far is helpful. I do think that we're in a very difficult spot with this, right? The county, on the regulatory side of the county, you know, I think feels very strongly about the comprehensive plan and the concepts that it addresses. And now there is, like I just said, you know, the comprehensive plan has a little bit of everything in here, so it's going to be an impossibility to measure up to all of it. And it's kind of one of those circumstances in a lot of ways where you end up, you know, trying to solve for too many things and not doing any of it very well. So we will, you know, I appreciate any more feedback that there is to come, and we can take that and consider, you know, what we can do. But please recognize this isn't an attempt to somehow, I don't know, pick and choose what we want. It's an attempt to figure out how to make a very challenging and a very important site come together, given all the layers that are being put down on it.
Yeah, I just had a couple of other comments. I appreciate what you're saying. I think the comprehensive plan at best is sort of a concept, if you look at it that way. And way back in architecture school, one of my professors said concepts are a dime a dozen. It's how you bring them to fruition and what you do with them that's important. I think kind of what you're hearing here, there might be ways of looking at this a little more creatively, like Ken's points of you got parks there already that are mature growth. Why not try to use those instead of taking concrete and trying to turn it into a green area? I mean, there are things that possibly there would be a more creative approach to this, and I think that's what we're advocating. And if it sounds like criticism, I'm sorry, but we're just trying to say, hey, these are things we would think about. I think I said this last time, that this is a slightly larger plan, but it really reminds me of the development over by the Weston and the Mercer and the Sheridan, where they have a very nice park. And I've been trying to think of the landscape architect that did that. He is of some renown. Neil, do you remember that guy?
He's gone now, too.
Oh, okay.
What was his name? Do you
I can't remember, but he was, you know, they hired the best that they could, and he did a very nice park in between all of those buildings. And every time I've gone over there, I've never seen anyone in that park. It's gorgeous. It's now 15 years old, probably. I was on the board back when that first got approved. But it doesn't get used, and I don't want that to happen here. I mean, what you're designing is nice, whether it's appropriate or not, or whether it will ever get used. My experience looking at the Mercer Weston area is not going to get used, particularly if you have streets running through it and so on. So, you know, if you left an area like a heavily wooded area and tried to embellish that more so it was more of a forested park, it might get used more. But those are the kind of things I think we're trying to suggest here. And I understand all the regulations and rules and, you know, powers that be that are pushing you guys to try to come up with something that really will work, that's economically affordable, that can actually get built, that will interest developers, and so on. And I guess kind of collectively what we're trying to say is, okay, but let's put that little beret on, let's put that little creative thing on there, and what could we do with what's there? Because I think that's what you're hearing, is you got parks there. Why tear them down and try to build another park that in my mind will be like the Weston Park that won't ever get used? And I think that's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah, no, and I would appreciate the input and you know, there are some of the, you know, there's a difference of opinion about that too, right? I mean, which is going to be more used, a wooded area, you know, that is kind of left as a wooded area, or a park that's in, you know, that's made a place where people may come as a destination. You know, part of, I know you're aware, part of the push we get here too is make the park more of an, you know, of an athletic field. You know, there's not enough space for, you know, active engagement here. So you push in that direction, and it doesn't say, you know, make the park, you know, a passive, you know, forested zone. So there are design answers to that as well, not just, you know, driven by,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, kind of what I'm saying, though, is that one example we have in Reston of a smaller version of this is the one at the Weston, and it doesn't work, period.
Well, I don't know what it's trying to do. But
I'm not sure
But what I do know is that Reston Town Center itself has places of great activity for the art festival, which is coming up, I think, this weekend. It's
Right.
got the amphitheater, the ice skating rink. It's got lovely fees for the parking garages. And, you know, that's where people go, and that's intensive. And to me, for the size community that Reston is, and this is where I admit I'm speaking mostly intuitively and not with facts and figures in front of me, but for the size community this is, Reston Town Center to me holds the core the way it is, Market Street, all of those amenities down through there. I can't see why this should be a slightly greener version of that. It's too nearby in my sense of things. It needs to be some sort of more counterpart to the main town center. And it's not. It's the Weston, again, is sort of a slightly softer version of town center. And I just look at this, and again, when it's set inside of the streets, and to me that's why the Weston property isn't used, there are too many parked cars in the way. And it was probably satisfying some sort of development requirement in the first place. So the minute you set it inside the streets, even with lots of crosswalks, it's not that wide of a space. I mean, you know, what is not that wide? To me, it's not wide enough to be a park of the sort of significance that I'm thinking could be some real counterpart to town center proper.
Anybody else have any other comments? You guys?
You know, again, we appreciate your feedback. It's I look at the redevelopment objectives, right, for that are for RA, and the Reston Master Plan is highlighted here, and it says the redevelopment should be in harmony with the Reston Master Plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so again, I think we're taking the guidance that we can, and we're going to have to figure out how to work within the constraints that we have as well, and it's becoming a difficult needle in a thread.
Are there other iterations of this plan that exist? I mean, what, like you mentioned, concept plans are dime a dozen, whatever the saying was. What do those other plans look like, though?
Plans, dime a dozen?
Concept plans. Yeah, sorry. What do those plans look like, though? I mean, if we saw those and you said, this is why this doesn't work, maybe that would help tell the story better, too, of what you're up against, instead of just saying, this is it, this is what you're stuck with.
I think that's one of the grid of streets with the purple and blue, where it shows, and I don't know if we can go back to that one, there's just a technical aspect to where the street grids come through and create the fixed intersection.
There's no way to
There
get
are
the
some
streets.
technical aspects, and I guess that would be a question, you know, like, if anybody had any comments or questions where we show the blue lines going through and where they connect to proposed streets that are either already built, proposed streets, you know, on the adjacent development plan, or they're already built, like that's an underpinning fundamental of the concepts that we've looked at, and so that does create a sort of organizational framework.
I think what Nick's asking is, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, is that the spectrum area that you're talking to?
Is in white.
In white?
Yeah.
The upper right-hand
Right.
corner,
Yeah.
that's in the spectrum development plan. So they have proposed street grids that we're connecting to, and then of course we have the existing street grid. So just from a technical standpoint, those intersections become very fixed points that has resulted in the grid of streets that you see here. So there would be major fundamental changes that would create another kind of concept.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, your grid, or your vertical road that goes straight up through the middle, yet the property has a bow to it. Why didn't the road follow the property? Why isn't the center road curved as the both sides of it
Go to
are?
the
I mean, is this
3D
piece of
grid.
property in the upper right has gotten to be very
That one
small?
right there. So you're talking about, so in this 3D view, it's what we call the little library street, that connection, that's what you're questioning, like why the connection?
No, I think he's questioning fountain. The fountain's curved and why we didn't, why we,
Why your Central Park Street
I
doesn't
see.
also curve to, I mean, I don't know, is the landscape such, the terrain such, I don't, sitting here, I can't say, is the
Mostly
terrain
to,
such
Yeah.
that you
mostly
can't?
to try to align, if you go one more slide forward, in the axes to the south that would connect down through to the metro.
Yeah,
But it just looks like the properties to the right of the line are your larger, more valuable property, and you've got that little one up in the corner there that you kind of sacrificed that, well, he's not good for anything anyhow, so we'll make that a little small.
It's an extension of the.
I
of the
I think it's
residential
getting
center.
distorted a little bit in the way that graphic is.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. It
know,
is conceptual graphic, I agree. I just, why that road has to be straight, why it can't follow the curves of the other two, which must have been done for some reason before my time.
It's a grid.
It's a wiggle.
Anyway.
Another answer to the question about where are the alternatives, right, is that that's why I thought it was useful to talk a bit about the history and the context, right? We didn't start, in the last year and a half with sketches about what alternatives could be, right? That was a process that this grid, evolved from a conversation that began 8 years ago in these various committees. We didn't draw the grid at first, and it ended up in the comprehensive plan, and we kind of went from there. The design charrette aspect of what we've done has been on, what's happening within the green, what happens within that space, and what is that mix of active and passive, and et cetera. So, we didn't start with a bunch of things and rule out.
I'll just go back again. I think I look at the Reston Comprehensive Plan as a guide. It mentions grid of streets, I think, a number of times for sure, with regard to TSAs, with regard to the urban areas. But I think it left a lot of room for creativity in terms of how you could lay out those streets. And again, I would emphasize, look at it as a guideline, but see how you could work with the parameters given to you as well, especially when you're coming to an organization like DRB that's trying to help it blend into the rest of the community.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Just to be clear, that is the image in the comprehensive plan, right? So it isn't just words about a grid. There's a very particular grid there. But I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to make sure we're starting from the same baseline.
Just think of the wonderful difference if any member of this board had been part of that crew that came up with that, and I'm still sorry we weren't. However, we've run out of time. Thank you all for coming in and listening to us, letting us listen to you.
Thank you for your time.
Let's see how we go here. Our regular meeting will start in 2 minutes, roughly. to approve the minutes of last month's meeting.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, point of order. We need
Yes.
to establish quorum.
A quorum is present. Is that all you needed to hear?
Sure.
Okay. We have a motion and a second about the minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second?
Sure, yeah.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any general members' comments? Okay, we'll move on with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation sidewalks.
All right, so as you said, we're with the Fairfax County DOT. We have a new sidewalk project on South Lakes Drive that we're just kicking off. We're in the very initial stages of the design, so we haven't approached the community yet. We're coming to you guys first here to get your feedback on where we stand, at least initially here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Max for a brief presentation, and then we'll get your feedback.
Thank you very much opportunity give us to come in here and presenting this sidewalk, pedestrian sidewalk around South Lake Drive. My name is Max Ojadzadeh, project manager with Fairfax County Department of Transportation. In general, I'm going overall very quick the existing situation and the existing ground, that area, and what we want to do, and we're proposing to improving that sidewalk. This project is being built at 3 segments, which is missing sidewalk on South Lake Drive. First segment is between, I'm sorry, let me read this one. Between Green Creeper Court to Soapstone Drive. And the second segment kick out from West Purwood Glen to High Ridge Road. And the third one will be located at the Twin Branch intersection with the Sunrise Valley Drive. This is the segment is missing sidewalk. The next one is I'm going to show you, this is existing ground, looks like, is we have a curb, the existing curb and gutter, and limited space for providing sidewalk, and behind that they have a roll of tree and landscaping.
Just out of curiosity on that, if you go back to that last slide, I mean, we've got a Reston trail, 15 feet away from the curb, and what's the point of having a sidewalk there and taking away all the trees right next to a Reston trail? The logic kind of is lost on me.
Yes, at this point, yes. We time back I have a plan here, I can later on show you. This is just overall. We time back at this point and providing the new sidewalk from this point to head.
So we're connecting the missing links.
Missing
So you're
link.
right.
I
it does-
understand what you're doing, but if you're going to put a 6-foot wide sidewalk there, starting from the curb, or if there's going to be a grass strip and then a sidewalk, we're going to lose all those trees. It's going to completely change the nature of the Reston path that's right next to it. And I just wonder,
To add to that, why couldn't you connect the Reston path to make that the missing link and then make it very difficult to use that goat trail? Maybe put in more landscaping there.
But you can see with the goat trail, people are choosing to walk along
It's because it's
the road.
available now.
Right, so we're trying to fill the need. We're trying to put an ADA compliant facility in a path where people are walking today.
I understand we run into the rules and regulations all the time, but it just, the logic of this escapes me because it's redundant to have 2 paths within 5 feet of each other. That doesn't make any sense to me. And again, like you heard part of the discussion we had with the people just before, if you can get a little more creative with some of your applications and not just, the standard facility says X and it does this and the sidewalk's this big and all that stuff that we're all aware of, and say, well, God, this is a unique situation. What can we do here to make this work? That's all we're asking, We hope you guys listen, Anyway, carry on. Redundant sidewalks
Yeah.
kill me.
In overall, we are proposing to almost 3,600 linear feet concrete asphalt for this tree segment. Also, we are proposing 150 sidewalk on the intersection of the Twin Branch and South Lake Drive. We are upgrading all curb as entrance. Is probably 17 curb. They should be upgraded to latest ADA. And also, we upgrading bus stop, 6 bus stop at this location with ADA loading area. Also, we installing 1 bus shelter at the Greenwatch Way per citizen request. Also, in the future, without they're going to have rebuilt that intersection of the Twin Branch and South Lake Drive, which is we're working with the VDOT to coordinate that one with our project. That way, it's possible to go together.
Just one question on the, from Soapstone on South Lakes, you're going to go west with a sidewalk? From that intersection? Going west, or you going east as well?
No, from Soapstone, we're going to the west.
Just going to the west? Okay.
There's already sidewalk to the
As
east.
far as the high school.
Just a question that doesn't really relate to this. Are you guys responsible for the walk signal at that intersection?
That would be VDOT that maintains the pedestrian signals.
Yeah, just checking.
Shucks.
I'm going to show you one typical section for this. As we know, we to limit it, the doing impact all tree and the grading area of that area, we proposing to have we have existing curb and gutter. We're going to have it a standard buffer zone is 4 feet. We're going proposing 2 feet buffer zone with the 6 feet sidewalk, and behind the sidewalk we provide CG2, which the picture on the right side. This is the probably 2 years ago we proposing and built on Cold Neck. It's almost similar to that one. That way is limited and they're not less impact to the trees and grading area.
Okay, on that, sorry to keep interrupting you, but the sidewalk issue is kind of big around here, and I know you always have the little grass strip, you always have the sidewalk, and sometimes 4 feet, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6. But all the way across Wheelie Avenue from, say, the toll road all the way over to Baron Cameron, okay? There's some sidewalks in there, and depending on where you went, sometimes the sidewalk is right at the curb, and it's not like that. And it was because the conditions said you had to do that, because I don't know, fall off or trees, whatever the heck it was. But I would hope instead of sort of doing a blanket design for everything that says that's what we're going to put everywhere, there might be places you could go right next to the curb because you've done it before, and it makes for much better tree retention, everything else. So I would just suggest you keep that in mind, because you've done it before. You've done away with that little grass strip that no one likes to maintain anyway, and put it right next to it. I know we've heard all the discussions, well, then that's dangerous, it's this, it's that.
Mr. Chair, some of us like the little grass strip.
I'm very happy for you.
We've actually done both on this project because we recognize that we want to save as many trees as we possibly can. And you can see from our typical section here, it's less than what the VDOT standard recommends.
I appreciate that.
We already have, we've tried to lessen the standard typical section. We've also used curb abutted sections in areas where it's really tight to where the berms are and the trees are. So we have made an effort to do that. We haven't applied it for the entire stretch because, like you said, there's a balance between safety, people walking right next to the road, and the trade-off with more tree removal. So we were trying to thread that needle with our first cut at this.
But just for your, we proposing this one, and this one they have to go to VDOT for approval. We're going to send a waiver for 2 feet, waiver for your utility disrupt. depending without it get approved.
Good, thank you.
Next slide, I'm going to show you the area is most affecting the tree. We are affecting the area and the grading area, the sidewalk, we have to remove in the trees. This is the area, the beginning of the project, is most of the tree they remove. The second one is continue the second segment of the project. We have to remove that, grading that area and removing some of them trees. All trees will removing be more than 4 inch. And we are surveying that all tree at that area, and we have it in the plan.
Mr.
That
Chairman?
way we can count it.
Can we
Yes.
go back to the original slide, the prior slide, that picture? Again, a similar issue. You're not going to take into account that beautiful asphalt path there, and you're going to build a sidewalk next to it?
I have to show you the plan. This
Okay.
picture, they're not showing exactly what's happened. I'll be happy to show you the design. It's probably less than 50 feet from what you see here. We keep the asphalt and we shifted the asphalt to the sidewalk and continue. We recognize we keep that sidewalk as it.
I'm seeing at least one, two, well over a dozen trees being removed for this action.
It's hard to tell from your slides what's happening.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something also about this asphalt trail. It's at a different profile or a different elevation than the street, and it also goes into the to the neighboring community quite a far way. So if we were to leave that trail and not build a sidewalk, then it would take pedestrians into the
Understood.
community. Then they kind of go back out in the community and then onto the road.
Okay.
So yeah, it's at a different elevation, and it also goes into community far ways away.
Mostly are you in your own right-of-way, and you're only here for informational purposes?
Correct.
Okay.
But occasionally, you need an easement on RA property, and we do have a say. Is that sort of the way it is?
Yes.
So some of this we can affect, and some of it we can't.
I understand.
Yeah. This is the end of the project at Ridge Height, which is very tight with the bridge under the road. And we are going to relocate that guardrail, push them back to make sure we have a space for that sidewalk. We're going to have.
You're going to put the sidewalk between the guardrail and the street?
We are looking at that one, what's the best way to do that, as far as the design.
In that particular area, though, yeah, that's the only reasonable option.
reasonable.
Yeah.
And this is the location at the intersection. You see that on the left side picture, we're missing some sidewalk. The sidewalk is probably 150 feet to intersection. We continue this 150 feet to the intersection, and we're providing, I said that the future, without coming in and rebuild that old signal with the mast on and to be designed and relocate that old pole.
Will there be a crosswalk with walk lights or
Yes.
something?
There have to be
I mean,
4.
Right now, it just kind of,
That's right. We have a 4, we proposing to get probably 4-leg crosswalk at the 4 corner of this intersection. And
there is a tunnel a short ways up, but it's mostly for the housing across the street from the shopping center.
okay, I'm going over the schedule. We planning to finish this project by the end of this year. Finalize it, the plan. And probably in fall 2018, we are proceeding with the land acquisition. Probably take 7 or 8 months to complete land acquisition. This is scheduled. And we need to do some relocation, utility relocation, which are under review by now, and recognizing which utility they have to be relocated. Probably in the winter 2019, we should be finished the relocation of the utility. And probably construction start in the spring 2020. One picture I want to show you, this is the shelter of probably, this is not exactly, but similar to this shelter be installed at bus stop.
It's similar to the one at South Lake High School?
No, South Lake High School is all glass, right?
Well, that one appears to be glass.
It looked like the roof was different.
Oh.
I don't know.
But this is just a standard shelter we provide at that area.
I don't know who might have provided the one at the high school. It's been there
I'm not familiar with what
Well,
that
no,
one
longer
looks
than
like.
I am.
Yeah. I'd be happy to.
Do you have drawings of particular of the entire project? A couple of questions. What are you doing from Ridge Heights to tie into the path that crosses the dam down by the lake level? Right now, there's dredging equipment sitting there, so you can't even see it, but
We're not going that far.
That's all.
you're not crossing Ridge Heights?
No.
What's the point of putting a sidewalk? Doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's gonna tie into the trail on the other side.
On the other side of Ridge Heights.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking.
It's
You're
showing
gonna,
is that the left picture is showing at the beginning of sidewalk, continue probably 150 feet, and we connected to the existing trail, which go to down.
it runs along the lake. Right, okay, that's what I was asking, if you're gonna put in that piece.
That's right, yeah.
In the original package, it didn't include the piece from the south end of that segment too, from not Ridge Heights, but it's a little Whisperwood. It didn't include the piece from Whisperwood up to the next, and I was.
To High Ridge, that's right.
Yeah, that wasn't in the original. I see that's been added
Front
now.
of the school, they have probably 150 feet left. There's no any sidewalk at that area.
Up to the Whisperwood, and then from Whisperwood on, there's missing.
We will provide that one, I
Oh,
believe.
okay.
I show you the picture.
Well, it's shown in the new overall work area, but in the original one, that piece was not in there, and I was a little confused that you weren't doing that little section.
I'm not sure exactly what you
It might have been an early package that we received, I'm not sure. But that was a concern that you were leaving out that piece, because there are, as you know, 3,000 high school kids that go to Starbucks every noon, and that's quite a busy sidewalk along there. Maybe not all of them, but it seems like it.
Hey, let's see.
There will be a sidewalk continuous all the way from the high school all the way up
to High Ridge.
to the Ridge Heights and beyond to the, okay.
Okay, is anyone else? Nick, you got any questions, thoughts?
I was just looking at the map on the Lynx Pond, and you guys had some concerns with the asphalt trail. It just dead ends in that Lynx Pond cluster. So it seems like if there was a desire for the trail, it'd be RA or the cluster coordinating with FICDOT and Reston Association and to make that happen. So I think the sidewalk makes sense along there, just given the dead. I mean, I appreciate that we want the trail system to kind of win out, but it looks like it's all private. So I think it's a better solution than folks walking through the dirt.
Okay.
Actually, this piece, some of them, this piece is close to a school. And I believe the recommendation for this sidewalk is somehow helping the kids from a school. They can use the sidewalk.
Excellent. Neil, any comments?
Well, while I like the 2-foot landscape strip, and I was kidding the chair a second ago about that, again, I'm not fully soaking in all of the topography and local situations you're dealing with. But yes, in the past, we've eliminated the 2-foot strip. We've gone to 5-foot wide walks. We've done a number of things if mature canopy could be preserved by doing it. So I'd put that back into your suggestion box, not knowing exactly, again, maybe it's never affected, maybe it's sometimes an issue. And I'm still not because I didn't look it up like Nick had the foresight to do, but if you've got parallel trails for any significant distance, it seems like one of them could be eliminated. It sounds like that's probably not exactly what's happening. And maybe we would like to separate the trails with some landscaping if it's especially awkward. So those are my comments.
What is the requirement for 6-foot sidewalks all of a sudden? Why do we need 6-foot sidewalks?
Well, the reason we do 6 feet because the some area from the school, we want to make sure the kids they can do bicycling. With that area, because Ryan he can tell me better. They have a proposal or they have a future paving on South Lake Drive for bus path, for bike path. At that area, they cannot have any design for bike path because the road is narrow and they don't have any median to use in that median. And that's phase they cannot really have any that area, any bike. We proposing to using 6 feet, a little bit wider sidewalk. That way, that kids they can do the bicycle.
Keep the younger kids to be up out of the street. That's excellent, yeah.
Grace?
Yes, I have a question. What kind of feedback have you received from the adjacent?
We haven't approached
Properties.
the community yet. We were starting with you guys before we took that next step.
Okay,
But I mean, that's part of what we'll do moving forward.
okay. My concern would be trying to preserve as many trees as you can along the path.
Bruce?
Nothing additional to add.
Okay. Just a question. There've been a couple of meetings about striping for bike paths on South Lakes and striping on Soapstone. Some of that's done already, and other places for bike paths. And I was wondering if, I guess that's all VDOT, that's not you guys, right?
No, that's them.
Or is it them? It's you guys?
We coordinate with VDOT, yes.
Okay, but I'm just wondering if you've got, what's a bike, like 3 feet, whatever it is, if there are places where a bike lane is going to be striped, then maybe you can shrink the little green thing down because cars aren't going to drive in the bike lane, so you've got already a buffer from the traffic lane to a bike lane to a sidewalk without the green strip in there. You might be able, like Neil said, if there's you get a decision where you can shift something a little bit and save a bunch of trees, we would all certainly appreciate that. And particularly if there's a bike lane, then already you got a buffer. So
They're not able to put the bike lanes on South Lake, is that correct? They're gonna put the, whatever you call the little bicycle with the chevrons for the right lane
They're putting bike lanes, in different sections of South Lake. So I think they're putting bike lanes from Twin Branches to Ridge Heights, and then they're also putting bike lanes from Soapstone to Colts Neck.
So those are gonna be one lane,
Those are going to be one.
So
lane.
South Lakes will be one lane.
but the piece from
Right, from like Colts Neck to Soapstone.
Colts Neck on down to will have to stay because of the high school traffic.
Exactly. Yeah, so we're leaving 2 lanes within the high school area because obviously.
And just
the
put
high
in the
school-
shared lane on the right lane,
Exactly.
which seems to work.
Yeah, and to your point, where we propose bike lanes, where we want to make a connection with the sidewalk, so that's why we're having a wider sidewalk than initially. We first started out with an 8-foot sidewalk, given that we knew that there'll be bike lanes coming in the future, or we wanted to accommodate bike traffic. But obviously, the topic of conversation is tree preservation and all that stuff. So we moved it down to 6 feet.
Okay. All right. For no other questions, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Expect to see a complete redesign next time we see you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Put them 6-foot walks on there.
Really? Okay, Round Pebble Lane. Hey, this is a request for an appeal, so The rules on that are, if there's new information that we hadn't heard before, there was a panel before, the members on that panel, let's see,
You and me.
it was Ken and me and
Richard and Charlie.
Charlie.
Was one of those.
Richard and Charlie.
I'm Richard.
Yeah, two.
Oh,
You.
just the two
Was
of
there
us?
just the two of us that?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, because the third, okay. All right, so we're not allowed to vote on this, but we can be part of the discussion. But anyway, the approved guideline was not applied correctly, or there's new information we never heard before. So,
That would have an impact.
just, though, yeah. The, clarify for me, who's appealing? You're appealing. Okay, carry on.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bruce Boone, B-O-H-N. I live at 1138 Round Pebble Lane. It's my wife Nancy. We've been at that address for 16 years now. At the last meeting, and we've been discussing the project going on at 1136 Round Pebble Lane, a rather extensive project that involved major additions to the house, major changes to the footprint on the property, and more specifically, the issue that we're concerned about is the pool equipment. There's a very large pool in the back, and there was pool equipment directly behind the house which was removed to make room for the addition that was placed on the house. At the last Design Review Board meeting, the question came up as to the location of the pool equipment. And it was our understanding that had never been decided. What had been specified in the meeting minutes prior to that was that the equipment had been approved, but not the location of it. There were stipulations in the minutes of the meeting that it should be looked at as a location down by the side of the building that was extending to the back. You can look at the minutes and you can, I'll be happy to pull it out and read it if you want me to. But that was never completely approved. Now, at the meeting last time, that was presented as the approved location. That was news to us.
Different location, was it?
We had come to that meeting at the request of the owner to put the equipment on the backside of his property. We had agreed to that location. However, the people that lived behind him didn't agree with that location, primarily because of the noise generated by the equipment. So as a result, that location was disapproved. We had a fairly long discussion relative to where a good place would be. And I believe that you were the one that said, let's go find a location a few yards away from the previously approved location. In our view, there was no previously approved location. That was still subject to discussion. And in fact, the location that they are currently putting that equipment into is closer to my back deck than it was to the deck of the people behind me when we were proposing to put it on the back side of that property. So the noise consideration is clearly one of our issues. The other new piece of information that came up at that meeting was the fact that this was going to be a saltwater pool. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about saltwater pools. And the more research we did on it, the more we really became concerned, because there's been a marked increase in the amount of water coming into my property, which is right next door in the backside. Rainwater runoff, you should come see my backyard as a result of this rain that we just had this week. It's pretty significant. To control this, I myself built a berm that kind of directs the water around my property down the back. By means of explanation, what I'm trying to say is the salt water now, at the location where this pool equipment is going to be, has got only one place to go. That's into my backyard. I've spent a lot of money around my house reclaiming the woods in the back and creating a garden. My wife has done a lot of work. She's done.
Let me, if I can just interrupt you for a second. we're not trying the whole thing again here.
Okay,
Your new information, I gather, is the saltwater pool and the location of the equipment.
yes.
That is different from what was
And the
presented.
saltwater pool bears on the location of the equipment because of what's required to maintain the equipment and the water runoff. I have no idea what he's going to do with the backwash,
Okay.
all that
Just-
stuff.
Again, we're not hearing the whole thing until we decide if we're going to grant the appeals, so.
Okay.
Okay, so no misapplied guideline, but those are the things you feel is new
Yes.
information. Okay. Your turn.
So I guess I would say I'm having a hard time listening to that because both of you gentlemen were here at the last meeting. We spent 45 minutes on the location. I've got the letter for the large project where it was approved at literally within about 3 feet of where I'm proposing it now. I submitted the application because I would prefer to have it in the back of the yard. Okay? When the gentleman who's in the room as well back here shouted everyone down and said it was not going to be near his yard, we decided to move the pool equipment. So, to now say that he didn't agree with that, I mean, we all had to discuss for 45 minutes, and you, Sir Richard, proposed that that was a good compromise. Everyone verbally agreed. So I don't see how we have any new information.
Is the equipment different for a saltwater pool?
Not majorly. I mean, there's like one different component. And the fact is, Fairfax County allows saltwater pools. And we also talked about in the meeting, Bruce, and you stipulated that in the 5 years I've owned the home, you don't think that a drop of water has come down there. I made sure that my pool company doesn't let water come down into his yard. And so, and I understand the concern. If there's ever been any damage, and, I'm a little bit disappointed because in 5 years I've done a lot for the property. I understand we've had a big renovation. I understand that may has caused an inconvenience, and I did not intend for that, but the fact is, I don't think a drop of water has come from my pool down onto his property. And if it has, I would make good on that. I've done plenty for their yard, for the damage that was caused for the previous owner, and, so I'm having a hard time with this process.
All right, well, let's,
My wife.
The one other point I'd make, sir, if you don't mind, is just the saltwater issue was also addressed at that meeting. And I think we all agreed that was not a Reston Association issue. It's a county issue. And, I've always played by the rules, so
Okay.
I don't have an issue with that.
okay, yes, ma'am.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
At the
may.
last meeting, circulated was a plat of where the pool had been approved. It was incorrect. It was an incorrect plat. They had it in the very middle of the length of the wall, not where it was debated before. And Bruce and I were just dumbfounded over this, that I even got up, went to the board and pointed where it was supposed to be. And the whole board agreed with Mr. Zeller that that wasn't the location because that's not what you had in front of you. So that was misinformation right there. And
Okay, well, let's see any other questions anyone up here other than Charlie and myself might have to ask.
Still confused on the pool equipment location and what the original panel understood and what's there now and what was approved and so on and so forth. Can someone illuminate me one more time on all that?
I think staff would probably have a better grasp on that than I would, but I think when the larger project got approved, there was a location suggested. There was another location suggested at our panel meeting last month or whenever it was. And we massaged that a little bit at the last meeting, as I recall.
the original application called for the pool equipment to be closer to the new addition that was also on that application. Once the addition was built, it was found out that Fairfax County cannot allow the equipment to be where it was previously approved because it was too close to the windows. Okay, so because we don't do Fairfax County stuff, now the pool equipment had to be moved. So at the second meeting, the decision states that what will happen is it will be in the area near the addition where it originally was going to be, but it will be within several feet of the fence between these two properties, and that the applicant will provide to staff a drawing in measurements where exactly he would propose to put the pool equipment, and it was left right there.
So did that drawing materialize?
No.
Okay.
I did send that to Trevor.
When was that?
I sent it to him yesterday.
Oh, well, this drawing you're talking about is the first time, yeah, this is drawn on the original, the original application, and it's not within several feet of the fence. So you did send it.
Is that available for us all to see?
It's all in the
Yeah,
application.
I'm looking at it here, I don't know.
But I didn't want to do anything until you decided
Sure.
whether or not to.
Right.
Okay.
We didn't see that, by the way, until till today.
Early morning. It was just.
Today.
Mhm.
And when we looked at it, we noted that the location of the pool equipment that's in that drawing is right on the property line. The zoning folks down at the government office told us the setback requirements were at least 5 feet, minimum of 5. There's all kinds of setback
Okay. Well,
requirements.
let us see if we can get to the point of granting the appeal or not, okay?
Thank you.
Instead of going through all of this. So I gather the new information, if I can clarify this for my fellow board members, is that the equipment is not where we thought it was going to be, and that's the new information? Question mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess my comment is, I don't know where you thought it was supposed to be. I didn't think we had an approved location
I think
for
what
it.
staff just said is that at the last meeting, we all generally agreed to a location. The applicant was supposed to provide a drawing to them to satisfy what the panel at that point was trying to say or expecting.
At the last meeting, there was a drawing put on the table by Mr. Zeller that showed a location for the pool equipment, which was right where the air conditioners were, which is what he submitted with his original proposal. And he said, this is the approved plan. Nobody questioned that. We did. We questioned whether or not that was the approved plan, because we knew for a fact that the pool equipment could not possibly go where the air conditioners had been previously in the back. They brought those over and put them on the side right across from our property, and they were going to put the pool equipment in there. That was never approved. So that drawing was inaccurate. The information that was presented to you was inaccurate.
Okay, but I gather the request that the applicant produce a drawing showing where the equipment was going to go, to show it to staff so they could say, okay, that's that, did not happen.
Not until last night.
Not until last night.
In response to the, well,
Okay,
not until last
all right. Well, everybody has heard.
In our original discussion, we talked about a board and batten or some kind of fence surrounding the equipment to block the noise, and we don't see that.
I gather there's a fence there anyway. But that's, again, we need to decide if there's an appeal here or not.
There's also windows, and there isn't, he's, from what we understand, not allowed to put within 5 feet of the property line. There isn't room to
Okay, again,
put-
we're not, we have to decide if there's some new information so we can hear
All
all
right.
these wonderful things you all are saying.
Okay.
So, Neil, do you have any comments?
I think something ought to be done to decide where this pool equipment's going, other than just sending it back to staff for their approval. I think it's more sensitive than that. If that means we need to hear it as an appeal, I vote we hear it as an appeal.
Any other comments, thoughts?
Seems like there's new information based on the lack, or the compliance issue with county code, that this needs to be reconsidered, so I agree.
Is that a motion?
I move we grant that there's, or I move that we stipulate that there's new information and that we hear an appeal specifically for the purpose of locating the pool equipment.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Can I,
Aye.
can I say something else?
No, not now. Hold on. You're going to get your chance. All those in favor, everybody said aye, right?
Aye.
Those of us who are.
Okay. All right, so now,
2 abstains.
if we could, I think it would help everybody if we could get the site plan of what we're talking about up on the wall over there. I mean, all we're trying to establish is where this equipment either is or needs to be. Okay, and I thought that's kind of what we had done last time.
I made a recommendation last time. Nobody picked up on it. Don't think anybody
Finish what I
wanted
was
to.
just saying. I thought we had gotten to the point where we had agreed on a location. That's why I want to see the site plan. So if we're near it, close to it,
Can I ask a question of the board? Has anyone gone out and looked at this property in this area, in the back of these houses? And are familiar with the layout back there and what's going on?
we relied pretty much on the photographs that were in the packet.
Photographs don't tell everything.
I'm aware of that.
Okay, this,
But you just had a site plan there.
Yeah.
There you go.
this was in the latest application.
You have a scan of what I sent Trevor?
That is in the original application. So this right here is the latest application. I can't do like side by side, but this right here is the latest application.
Is that the plan we saw at the panel
Yes.
meeting?
Okay, so you see the pool coming here.
Can you show us on that plan where the pool equipment is?
What he originally submitted.
I can't read it from back.
It's,
The orange area there.
So
Well, the orange area is the addition.
Yeah, but
That's
if
what
you go up
kept
a little, shift
throwing us off.
You'll see that.
The original
that's where it was
pool
drawn in, and then the decision says it should be within several feet of this area. And that we were supposed to be getting a drawing of.
So it doesn't show that blue rectangle area along the property line on there, does it?
That's the other end.
That's what I just
So that's
provided
the other,
yesterday.
yes.
Supposed to be the air conditioner.
That says relocated pool equipment at 8
Right
Yeah,
there.
if I may, I
That's
can explain.
not
So,
correct.
This was under the building.
so what happened was, the original application approval was changed during the meeting at the request of the Boones. We moved the equipment because I had to put shrubs around the HVAC equipment, which no one else in the neighborhood has done, and I had to move the pool equipment. So we did that. We didn't know that, even though I had an architect in the room, that the pool equipment couldn't go there because of the windows. The proposal I have on the table right now is to move it 3 feet to the left. It'll be against the fence that's right there, but the county distinguishes, the property line is basically the midpoint between the two buildings. I have that printed out here, if you'd all like to see it. So there's no county issue, there's no county issue on
Excuse me,
saltwater.
that's not true.
Please don't interrupt me, Bruce.
That's not true.
Okay, well, we'll give you a chance.
Have some level of courtesy. Okay, so my proposal is to put it basically to the left of where it was approved a year ago. And the approval says that the pool equipment be relocated adjacent to the angled rear wall on the south side of the new addition, and a landscape buffer be installed and maintained to screen it from view. I've got pictures of the place I'm proposing it to be. You can't even see the Boone's house from there. It's so,
Well, is the drawing that just was received yesterday different? Or where does it show the equipment
Okay.
going?
All right, you all have this in front of you, and that, where it shows the equipment location is
right on front.
different. It's
Maybe it's
different
not equipment, actually.
than this picture here that's on the screen.
He wants to move it there.
Would you, you
So
want
it doesn't seem right that it's right on the property line. It should be a few feet away.
do you want to see the decision that you guys made?
Yeah,
Because,
they've got it, yeah.
It
No,
has to
that's
be
not
a
it.
few feet away. It has to be 5 feet away.
I don't want to get into trying to decide what is or isn't a property line. I think a property line is a property line. And I think, as Neil just said, to locate equipment right on a property line is not the intention I think we were trying to accomplish here. We were
That's
trying to,
that's what we specifically said, though. We said it had to go along there because there was no place along the home there to do it.
okay, this is the decision, the original decision right here, but here is the decision that was made a couple months ago. Approved mechanical equipment, and then when we get down here, see.
It says within several feet of the previously approved side yard
Right,
location.
that's what I was looking for. It's number A1. That the mechanical equipment be installed to within several feet of the previously approved side yard location and a new drawing be submitted to staff for approval prior to installation.
So what is
And-
the previously approved side yard location?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out what that is.
Okay.
There was always a pool there and the equipment used to be under the deck?
I'll show you the, well,
That was
it's on,
there
the-
before the addition was installed.
yeah. This is, okay,
And it was open air?
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
The pool equipment followed the international code, swimming pool code, and it was 20 feet from the property line, 5 feet in from the side of the house, and 5 feet in towards the middle of the house. And we still had problems with the pool technician.
I'm sure it's like they say put it on property line. Originally, we talked about putting it on this way, where there wasn't windows.
Can the full board refer something to a panel for final review? If we make a suggestion tonight, or do we have to sit here and dice this out amongst the?
No, I think we can make a suggestion and then decide it can go back to panel if we want. I mean, because the appeal's been granted, okay, so
Yep,
now
the appeal's been granted. You can make a decision.
we make a decision to
Right.
defer it and send it to a panel until the final location is determined, or also, we have lots of options. The answer to your question is yes. It's part of your motion to refer it to a panel, so we don't have to.
Well, I don't want it to go back to staff. I think panel needs to see this. Or it can come back to the next month's full board, but I know that's tedious for everybody. Or we can make a decision. I think it can go generally where you've shown it in this latest drawing, but it needs to be, to me, at least 5 to 10 feet off the property line
And why is that, sir?
because of the impact on your neighboring property.
What
It's
impact
pool
is
equipment,
that?
it makes noise, it has an impact. It also has to be backwashed, and I'm sure you'll do a good job of keeping the water off their property, because if you didn't, they're coming after you.
Right.
But the guidelines say it should be located to have as minimal impact on neighboring properties as possible, and I don't see how right on a property line is minimal impact.
But if you see the pictures of that part of their property, I mean, it's well wooded. There's-
I'm telling you, on the property line is not minimal impact on your neighboring property, period. It's on the property line. That's not appropriate.
We spent 45 minutes last time, we decided on this location, I agreed to the.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
Well, unfortunately,
Rub me, Bruce, it's rude.
guys, unfortunately, once the appeal was granted, we're in effect rehearing the application.
Yeah.
So
But I-
what happened
the issue I
before
have is I felt-
doesn't count.
I felt like we spent 45 minutes on it. I agreed to that location, which is not where I'd like it to be, but I also agreed to put the wood fencing around
I
it.
understand what
to
you're saying. I don't think
minimize-
anyone on that panel agreed to putting it right on the property line. I don't think we did. That's why we wanted to see a drawing. And now we're seeing a drawing, and it's right on the property line. I think Neil's correct. Part of our job is not to impact neighbors with whatever you do on your property. And I think it has to be a minimum off the property line, some distance. So I think we can decide tonight if we think it should be 5 feet off the property line, 2 feet, whatever we decide. I think we can do that and get this over with.
Can I
personally.
tell you what the ordinance says for PRCs?
You quoted it just a minute ago, didn't you?
I quoted at least 5 feet minimum, but
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Can I let you know that that's not accurate? I mean, I've got it right here, so that's not accurate.
I have it right here also.
Okay.
Well, anyway.
We got this from the Fairfax County Government Office,
Okay.
just this past couple
Does
of
anybody
weeks.
else have any other comments about this as to where it is?
Yeah,
How do we all feel about it being on the property line? Say it has to be off. Ken?
I would agree. I would think there would be a more innovative way to do this versus to slap it right on the property line. I don't think the panel would have seen it that way. Knowing you two, if you saw it proposed that way, I don't think you would have said go for it. I think you would have said, hey, is there a way to move that a little bit? I think there's a lot of room back there, and maybe there are some engineering requirements, but I think there's a way for people to put this in a proper spot. But not there.
Can I ask one other question?
No, let us discuss it for just a minute. We'll get back to you.
I agree.
Grace?
I agree, that it should be offset within at least 5 feet, just like Neil said. I do have a question. Charlie, you mentioned screening. Did you?
We had discussed it needed to be fenced or some kind of
Screened.
evergreen or something that would, it does make some noise.
It's number
And-
2.
Yeah, it's number
That's
two.
what I thought.
Yeah. Nick?
Nothing to add.
Bruce?
I was just thinking whether we're going to give a direction of distance or send it
think
back.
so.
Is that
That's-
the other-
I think we can make a motion to disapprove it, and then a new application comes in for where the pool equipment goes, and it can be heard by any panel, because it's a new application. It's not this one anymore.
I'd hate to see
I'd send it back to you.
I'd hate to see the homeowner get delayed being able to use his pool for half the summer, waiting for another chance to get before the board, though.
Well, let's come up with a proposed location then. I think it's going to be challenging to do it in this setting. I don't like the one that's been presented. So, and calling it out verbally is, I think, a little bit why we are where we are. Everyone interprets it differently. So,
No, I think there's some merit in deferring it and having the applicant come in with another drawing saying this is where it's going to go and see if the panel approves it. And I think what we're kind of hearing is we're all seem to be agreeing to a minimum of 5 feet off of a property line. And with that guidance, give us a drawing that shows that where you would put it. And I think that's kind of where we are. I agree with Neil saying, well, that's happened before.
Probably a little larger scale, too.
Larger scale would help, but that's all right. So I'll make a motion that.
You can't make a motion.
I can't make a motion, never mind.
May I just, if you look at the property, when we had the discussion before for 45 minutes, there isn't 5 feet there. So to propose that, I think is not fair to me. I've already waited 5 months to get this looked at. And frankly, I've got the plat of their property. Their home is over 35 feet away from that spot. It's less than 5 feet away from where the equipment was before, maybe 8 feet. So how this impacts their property, I don't know. But if the rules of the Reston Association are all you have to do is stand up and say I'm impacted, you're going to have a plethora of issues on your hands.
I've done this for 15 years, and I've never approved pool equipment on a property line. You're not being singled out in any adverse way whatsoever.
I'm just asking what the rules are, because I asked last time, because I had somebody shout me down that he didn't want it next to his property. I'm just trying to figure out, is it he who yells loudest gets heard?
No.
Or what is the rule? I'm just trying to be clear, because I've spent dozens of hours just on this application trying to figure it out. And I think the gentleman would remember last time, I came in with a very open mind to say, I'm open to any location. We came up with a plan, and now we're going back to the drawing board. It's frustrating, and frankly, it's not.
Part of the problem is, though, I think we were expecting a solution that would come in, that's why we said it can go to staff, because we thought a solution would come in that was acceptable. I think what you're hearing is this location that you're suggesting isn't acceptable, because it's on the property line. And I don't think, as Neil says, I don't think we've ever approved pool equipment or mechanical equipment of any form on a property line. And I think that's why we're having this discussion and why I think it needs to be resolved one way or the other. It's not going to get approved on the property line. Okay, this is now we're hearing this now as a new almost application, because that's what we have before us is the drawing you presented, and it shows the equipment on the property line, and I don't think we're going to approve that. So I think we've got a couple. We just say we disapprove it, leave it up to you to come back with a better solution. Hearing what we said, that we're thinking a minimum of 5 feet off the property line. I'm guessing at this, but if you'd come back in, it was 3 or 4 feet off the property line, we might have said, sure, fine, no problem.
Ask, can we just come to an agreement on, we put it 2 feet or 3 feet off the property line?
I think Neil's point is that we need to see something that shows us that. Panels meet every week. If you get on the agenda.
It's been 2 months since the last meeting we had, sir. I don't see how that's going to.
Well, if it was 2 months since then, I'm sorry that this drawing didn't come in until last night. If it had come in 2 months ago, you might not have been delayed 2 months, so I don't think that's RA's issue here. If you would come back the next week.
Had to be heard no matter what, so.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, don't blame us for the 2 months. I think if you'd come back a week later with the drawing you just presented tonight, maybe you would have heard this 2 months ago. So I think we're kind of at that point that I don't trust just saying, move it 5 feet off the property line, let's see where it ends up.
So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the application as previously submitted, with the one stipulation that the pool mechanical equipment be moved a minimum of 5 feet from the, what is that, the west-east property line?
East.
That's north.
And
Really, east. Yeah. East.
I think we can
East
still
property.
suggest that it go to staff for final approval if it's 5 feet off of the property line. That's my quasi-motion there.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Everyone understands that.
Oh, and one further part of the motion, with the understanding, of course, that any backwashing and other use of the equipment is not going to have an adverse impact on the neighbor's property.
That is my question. What is the
Now part of the
plan?
motion.
It can't come on your property, period.
I'll take that amendment.
And how is that going to happen?
I'm sure
I've
you'll
owned
police
3
it.
pools, so I know what backwashing involves. And it involves the discharge of pool water.
That's why we have covenants. You'll be back. But he's not going to let that happen because he doesn't want to be back.
I don't know where he's going to put
Out
it.
of his mouth, he said it's
That's
never happened in
not-
5 years.
That's
So-
not our issue right this second. There's a motion and a second.
That's not true.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, at one point, out of fairness, the notion was that somehow where does this requirement come from? I think the point was made, and I think it's fair that in the guidelines, it indicates that it should be located away from the neighboring properties and screened. So I'm seeing that this motion, the second, is consistent with the guidelines.
Okay. All right, with no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Can I say something?
Okay, but we're done. There's a motion, we're done. Go ahead.
Yesterday, they removed several holly trees from the location where he wanted to put the equipment.
Okay.
Doesn't he need DRB approval to remove those trees? He also removed some in the backyard.
Under 4 inches in diameter, they don't have to talk to us.
A holly is an ornamental tree. Yes, they do, I was told.
I had approval in here. You want to adjudicate that as well? It's approved in here, okay?
From
Okay,
yesterday.
we're done.
I'm going to adjudicate that tonight.
No, we're done. We're done. Thank you all. Moving right along. This next one's even more.
I really wanted to send this back to Charlie and Richard for further discussion.
We're not on a band together anymore, though, see?
I just showed up on
Never
mine
know.
because of that.
Triple Crown Road.
Margot. Thought they went on vacation. Correct. Richard got carried away.
I got excited. I got excited. Hey, Lisa, just notice that Charlie and I did not vote on that.
I
We
did.
abstained.
I noticed you abstained.
Thank you very much.
This sounded a little like it.
And there's
Good
more
catch.
abstaining.
Very good catch.
Who can?
It would be
I'm out on this one.
Richard, Nick, and Ken.
Oh. Nick, Ken, and me, so that, okay, we still got
That leaves us
four.
enough.
Okay, this is another appeal based on, I gather here, a lack of notification. And I was just, well, go ahead. You're the appellant? Appealant? Whatever.
Hi, I'm Leslie Platt, and that's my wife Marcia. We've lived in Reston for 48 years, and we are big believers in the Reston ethos. And so we're here tonight because we built our dream house on Triple Crown Road about 30 years ago, and we're not wealthy people. We sweated blood to get in there, and we built it with love, and we've lived there a long time. And so we care about what happens to our property impacted by neighbors. And so in January, this is what we saw. And I don't know if you can all see it, but this is what we saw. So I called up Trevor Wright, and I said, "What's this?" And I said, "Is there an application? Do you guys know about it?" He said, "No." So he said, "Well, the only way we can take notice of it is if somebody files a complaint." I said, "Well, that's a new thing to me. RA staff used to come out and take a look at things when you told them to avoid the problems." So I wrote up a thing that's saying there's something that hasn't been applied for. What is it about? I complained about it, which is what Trevor told me to do. And so the next thing I know is there was a notice that the complaint had been received from Tricia Filbert, and I know the staff works very hard to do these things properly according to the procedures in place. But then what happened was an application was filed, and the application had defective notice. So we tried to point that out when a panel met. None of the 3 signatures were in view of this, and representations have been made that that's not the case, but in fact it is. 2 of the 3 signatories are across the street. And the third one is on the other side of the property, and I took a picture yesterday of where this new alteration is, and that's the place from which, with a fence in between, there's supposed to be visual sighting of this. So I'll pass this around so you can all see it. So in effect, there was a defective notice, and the fact that there was actual notice to us, because we struggled to do this, and I spent tens of hours and a lot of money to deal with these things over the years, when we've been adversely impacted by neighbors. And we have nothing to the Berries. We just want them to enjoy their property, and we want to enjoy ours without being impacted. So the basis of this appeal that we file is simply that there was no notice that's compliant with the requirements of the DRB, and it was after the fact. And the thing that really got us was, we've been to several RA meetings and where the DRB has talked. And at the panel we were at, the after the fact and the fact that it was inadequate notice was dismissed. It happens all the time. Let's get to the substance. There's nothing here. In fact, that's the wrong thing. We went to another RA DRB meeting where the chair, and it's one of you gentlemen, I'm not going to single out individuals, absolutely was ferocious about late application, particularly when, as in this case, there was no neighbor notification. Either these requirements are there for a reason, and the RA and the DRB board that volunteers, we know you're all volunteering lots of hours and you're doing good deed, and the staff is trying to do the best it can, but here's the problem. If you don't insist on some minimum level of compliance and you just wade through willy-nilly, one panel says yes, another panel says it doesn't matter to us, there's a problem. So our appeal is very simple. We would like to have this group hear what we have to say on the substance, because we were never given notice as is required by the rest and deed, the covenants, your guidance, your own FAQs on this matter, and we want to actually have this seen because we have a lot of substantive reasons for making this appeal. So we respectfully request that the appeal be granted because there was defective notice. Nobody who could see this thing was given notice. Was signed. So effectively, none of the 3 neighbors to whom this was given were notified. And the issue first was when the application came in late, that it was blamed on the contractor who didn't know. Well, it's the owner's responsibility. And then the second thing, in the Berry's appeal to what we're reply to our appeal, they're blaming the staff and saying the staff said it's okay because the Berries have had problems with the plats before, so they didn't have to tell us. They could go along with the people on the other side who can't see this thing. I'm sorry, I don't think the RA staff has the authority, or should have the authority, to basically say when the rules apply and when they don't, because they like or don't like what somebody is saying. That's sort of like lawless. And so we're here because we want you to stand by the rules that you set up. We don't need to pay for RA a lot of money every year to have the rules sort of applied some of the time when you feel like it. It's not right. And so having heard from one person and from another at two different panel meetings, two different variations, totally different. The people who came into the other panel were turned down in part, in no small measure, because they came in after the fact and evidenced bad faith. What I'm saying here is, I don't know whether it's bad faith or it's not bad faith. I don't know what it is. RA staff can't waive the requirement, nor should anybody on this panel not follow the rules. If you allow this to happen, it's going to happen more. It's not fair.
Okay.
So I ask you please to grant the appeal so we can actually talk about the substance of this request.
Okay. I think generally the notification process around here is one adjacent neighbor and two other neighbors. I believe the notifications were given out appropriately. You didn't get one, okay, if that's the issue. But I think the notifications were done in accordance with Reston's regulations. At the same time, you were notified, I gather, on February 12th, and you replied 2 days later as an affected party. So you obviously got notice. You didn't get the initial notice. That just happens sometimes when they look at a map. They say, if we got the next door neighbor and here, proper notice has been given. You didn't get it. We're sorry about that. But you didn't get it. You didn't have to get it. They followed the Reston regulations. So then you applied and became an affected party on February 14th. On February 19th, you replied to a February 15th confirmation that you had affected party status. So you were indeed notified well in advance of the March 13th meeting. This didn't come as a surprise to you. You were part of it, part and parcel of it. You knew what was going on. You were notified. I don't see what the issue is here. I heard what you said.
May I say something?
You're going to tell me that it wasn't done properly, and I'm saying it was done properly.
I'm going to tell you that there is a reason why applicants are supposed to apply before the fact to notify 3 neighbors. In their own rebuttal to our appeal, they say they didn't tell us, and RA staff said they didn't have to. And so what I'm basically arguing for is the rule of law. I'm arguing here that you follow your own rules. You can say all you want that we had actual notice. The notice was defective. And if we pursue this, you can say substantively it was satisfied. But in fact, the rules were jiggered, and it's not right. And the more you tolerate that,
you're not listening to what I'm
the worse
saying.
it is.
I just said according to the guidelines and the regulations they have to notify 3 neighbors, 1 adjacent and 2 others. They did that.
That's not true. It says right here, they're supposed to have
hold
at
on a
least
second.
3 most affected neighbors.
Let me just ask, we just happen to have an attorney sitting here. Let's ask him if he thinks, or what his feelings about
There
this
it
are.
is.
Mr. Chair, I take your reading of the rules, of the governing instruments, that the notice was properly done, that it does require 1 adjacent lot owner and 2 other neighbors. I don't see anything, bear with me just 1 second, states on the
Can I show you the thing in your own FAQs? This is right out of the RA FAQs on that, on the interpretation that RA gives to that.
Give me a second, I want to look at the deed.
Page 19.
Mm-hmm.
Adjacent 2 are within, at least 3 different lot owners, adjacent 2 are within the applicant's alteration or improvement. Adjacent 2 or in view, but it doesn't require it be in view.
Read your FAQ, Mr. Champ. Would you please read it? I don't understand when it applies and when it doesn't apply, if it doesn't apply when you don't want it to.
Oh, frequently asked questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Understand that, and I appreciate that, but this is the highest authority, absent POA, that this association follows. This is the deed, and the deed would certainly trump.
So essentially, you can come in after the fact with an application.
That's a separate issue.
But you know, they're all balled
We're
together.
here talking
and the
about
more you-
notification.
Okay, it's obvious that we're not going to get a chance to talk about the things that really matter. I wanted to share with you concerns that we have about the process. We do not We do not substantively object to what the Berries are trying to do here, except that they don't treat us with the respect that we pay a lot of money for. And this is not supposed to happen, because you just said, Mr. Chairman, 15 minutes ago, that things are supposed to be done to minimize the impact on other parties. That's not the case here. And we have not...
I'm sorry, but that was discussed at length
It
at
was
the last
not-
meeting. And the panel that heard it decided, it was me, Ken, and Nick, I believe, that the minor impact of this door and a light fixture next to it was not sufficient enough to cause you theoretically any heartburn or anything else, because as we looked at your house, there were, and I don't want to get into this whole thing, there was more light coming out of your house than would ever come out of this single door and light. Now,
And I asked-
we're not talking about that tonight. We're talking about your appeal because you feel that you were improperly notified. I think what you just heard from the lawyer, our process was followed as it should have been correctly. You were then subsequently indeed notified a full month before the panel and attended that and got to say your piece at that meeting. So as far as I'm concerned, you were notified adequately, and we were still within our rights, or we followed our process, let's say that.
If you tolerate after-the-fact applications where there is no notification to people who are impacted, you can end up with a situation where people who want to play with the system can wait for others to go out of town, and then you're basically screwed. That's the reverse of what's supposed
That's
to
a
happen.
whole other issue. We unfortunately have, on occasion, people that have gone without coming here first. We certainly discourage that. And
That's not what you said. The two of you guys went and basically discounted that. It's unfortunate, but it happens. And I heard another panel where the chair, one of you gentlemen over here, and I don't remember which one, I think it was you, sir.
Yeah, I don't tolerate people that do things without applying.
Well,
None of us do, though.
Right, and you said that, and you turned it down. And here, this
We
is...
try to view it as though it were not applied for as we review it. If it's an existing condition, we view it as though it were not existing on its own merits. And from what I understand, I mean, that's not what you're here to make your piece about anyway.
It is what, because it's offensive that we never know when we're at risk with neighbors
I
if
would
they
feel
can
the
come
same
in
way
after
you
the
feel.
fact way.
I would
I don't
wanna
think
know.
there's a single
But you
person.
did find out. You did find out.
Yes, we did
And you
find
were
out.
and you were at the meeting.
Yes, we were.
So I can't see any grounds for hearing this again when you were actually in the room and had a chance to speak previously.
Because what was presented was railroaded over. We were not really listened to.
That's not true.
You've already said tonight you don't have any substantive disagreement with what's out there. Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we deny the appeal as there's no new information and the deed guidelines were followed for notification of affected parties. And in fact, the applicant has stated himself he has no substantive disagreement with the decision itself.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Nick, Ken, and myself have to abstain from this, so we will. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Glenvale condos.
It's a bad seat. Really is a bad seat.
But I don't have to.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Bradshaw, and I represent the homeowners of Glendale condominiums. I'm following up on our request to convert our metal halide lighting to LED. This is the third link in the process of trying. 2 months ago, I was in, and you requested that we install lighting on one building so you can actually see it. That was done, and notification was sent in 3 weeks ago. I'm waiting to hear the results.
Okay, you can come up and sit down if you want.
Yeah, have a
Please.
seat. Be part of the party.
Yeah, join the crowd.
Podium does make it sound better.
Okay, everyone has had an opportunity to go out and see the light. Any comments? Let's start with Nick.
I did not make it out there due to weather last night and travel.
demerits.
Oh, my goodness.
A little rain, come on, just a little rain.
Yeah, just
Little
a
rain.
car got blown off the road.
Hail count?
Great.
The trees were only sideways in front of them, so you couldn't see it anyway.
That was my plan yesterday.
We thought that was you in the van in front of us when we went out there. We really did. We're like, look, that's Grace in front of us. Bruce.
In the same boat up in America. All here.
Ken.
I think it was still a little twilight, so I don't know if I have a good reading, but I did not see any issues from a brightness standpoint. I wish I could have gone when it was a little bit darker, though. Maybe around 10 o'clock might have been a better play. But
Last night at 6.
yeah,
Plenty dark.
plenty dark. Might have had some moisture in between me and the light fixture, but at that time, it didn't. The brightness didn't seem to have an effect on me. My only concern was, in the black of night, would that brightness be significantly different? But at the moment, I didn't have an objection.
Okay. Charlie?
When I was out a couple days ago, I felt the spotlights were I drove down, and that's a maze, by the way. I drove down farther into the cluster. I felt the spotlights were indiscernible. They looked just like the others. The wall-mounted units seem to flare more to the out than down, and I felt they were maybe twice as bright as the old units on the other buildings. And I'm kind of curious what your residents think. I mean, they're intense. When you get out of the parking lot to walk up to the door, you can't see anything. The light's so bright in your face, and I was just curious if that was a concern with the residents. I just think they seem to flare out more than the originals did, and that's part of the design.
I think the wall packs are adjustable. The floods definitely are. They can be re-aimed.
No, the floods seem to be equivalent to the existing when I was out.
I've got one that shines in my patio window and it distracts me from watching TV.
Well, I mean, you got out of the car and I could read the drawing of what building was what by those lights. They're that
We
bright.
turned in the study and it was kilowatt per kilo, or lumens
Yeah.
per lumens, exactly the same exact setup that we have existing.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of the old metal halides have been there for a long time and the
They're weak.
screens are dirty. Some of them been up as much as 20 years. And I'm sure the inside of the lenses are dirty, so these may appear lighter. But we did turn in a study, and they're, like I say, lumen per lumen, identical to what we have on the property.
Yeah, no, I wasn't as much that they just seemed to flare more up and out rather than down.
Nature of a wall pack.
To be out like that?
Yeah, there's no shield.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
Yeah, the wall
They're not a
packs are wall
focused,
packs. Yeah, they're not adjustable, but the
Yeah.
floods definitely are.
Yeah. Neil?
So, as a change out from what used to be there at metal halide to the LEDs, I'm not going to have any problem. But I do want to make a little commentary that I don't think this is what we ideally are trying to accomplish with site lighting in our condominium complexes. I think we've previously approved it. I think the amount of trees that you have between your buildings helps maybe obscure some of the glare that might, on a more open layout, be more problematic. Wall packs in general, unshielded wall packs are sort of a last resort when people are concerned about security. We kind of like, okay, let it happen, or at least that's the way I think about it. So, you know, I don't go out there and think that this is a model lighting project. If money were no object and we could do anything we wanted out there, I'd replace your pole lights and put them slightly higher up and get rid of some of the wall packs.
All lights, we're not allowed to touch.
Well, I'm just saying, if I was the czar of,
The lighting czar.
Parking lot czar.
and a philanthropist on top of it to fund your project, I would try to get more ambient lighting from the pole lights and less of the glare from the wall packs. I agree that the spots, you can direct those. When you look right into one of those LED spots, it's pretty good and bright.
Yeah.
But at least you can, you know, if somebody complains, you can redirect it. And I think that's probably what we are most concerned about in this type of application is affected parties within your complex who can't sleep anymore because they've got this light shining in their bedroom or whatever. So unless you've got somebody complaining, And I think we would put that back on you to try to be responsive to people who are impacted negatively.
I think the initial lighting was really increased for safety concerns. I guess we used to be cheek to jowl with Southgate, and it's no longer as much a problem as it used to be. But everybody used to be concerned walking across the parking lot.
The buildings are really decorated up with surface-mounted wall packs and floodlights, and, you know, that's kind of like everything that we preach against in some ways.
Like I say, they've been there forever that I'm aware of. I've only been living there about 23 years, and not a single thing has changed.
In a little period of time.
Yeah. I agree with what Neil's saying, but I think the
Biggest thing, we have an opportunity to get a rebate from Dominion Virginia Electric and also for the manufacturer of about 30% of the installation cost of this. That's why before the rebate runs out, it's periodic with the manufacturer as they ramp up
I think
their
we're all for
production.
the LEDs.
Yeah, I think I mean, basically, as I recall, this was approved before with the stipulation that we get to go out and see one if it was too bright or not. I do think it's a little bright, but I think that in this particular case, there's enough landscaping, large,
nice trees,
big trees, wide streets, and regardless of the security issue, I think it's okay in this case because it's mitigated enough by the landscaping, the trees, just the way the whole complex is broken up. I think it's okay. If it was just one long shot with these lights on it, I would have to say no. But in this case, it's a whole bunch of little inserted mini cul-de-sac kind of arrangements. So I think it's okay in this case. And the brightness is, LEDs tend to be a little on the bright side anyway. But I think in this case, I don't have a problem with it. So
I got one more comment. I was surprised to read back that if these are 3,000 Kelvin, like we said, and I assume they are.
4,000.
Oh, see, I could tell the difference.
The 3,000 looks like a bug zapper. You would not have trouble seeing that. And the 5,000 is like daylight.
I think our decision said 3, and I honestly would have preferred 3. I can hear what you're saying, but I wish you'd done what we'd said. If you
No,
did.
it wasn't. Yours was 4. And
4 is what we
heard
said?
that, yeah. Matter of fact, when we initially.
Okay, 4 is what we said. I'm done.
okay.
It is.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we approve the lights after the inspection regarding the brightness and go back to where we were before. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
So where does that leave me? Can we go ahead with the rest of the development?
Go do it.
Yeah.
You'll get a letter shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out.
Colts Neck Road.
The horse house.
Logos. Oh, that makes a difference.
Thanks, son.
Cut off the small face.
How are you guys tonight?
Don't you say that.
Protruding from the break. It's kind of a deceiving section.
Started?
Go for it.
Good evening. We're representing 2222 Colts Neck Road. I'd like to introduce our team real quick. To my right here, we have Jester Tassimo. He's our Director of Development at Atlantic Realty. To my right is Dan Kane, who's our project architect with Mosley Architects. And my name is Bossy. I'm a project manager with Atlantic as well. Little background, so far with the DRB, we had our architectural and site plan approval back in November of 2015, and then we came back for our lighting and landscape plan in March of 2017. Tonight we're here for our comprehensive sign package approval and a small, a minor revision to our lap board siding. We started construction on the project back in May of 2017, and over the course of the last year we've made obviously a lot of progress. I think we're 4 stories off the ground. We started putting up roof trusses, and we've just begun our weather membraning, so it's coming along very nicely. And at this point, we are still tracking for what our original approved completion date was, which is March of 2019. So all's going well, and to get into the details of what we're here for tonight, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dan here to talk about the sign.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. The sign package that we're presenting, there's 4 different signs as part of this package. There's the monument sign, we have some wayfinding sign that'll be on site, and then a garage entrance sign that'll be installed on the building. The first one here is the site monument sign, which is directly off of Colts Neck Road at the main entrance. It is 8'8" wide by 1'8" deep. It has stone veneer and precast caps. The stone veneer is the same stone that's found elsewhere on the building and on the retaining wall. The precast caps are also the same precast that was previously approved. We have precast banding and accent pieces of planters and cap walls that have that precast. The sign is one-sided. It's angled to face Colts Neck Road, more from the direction that you'll see it coming down from the north of Colts Neck Road. There will be a aluminum panel sign that's pen mounted, so it stands off the wall for the stone, and then it will also include 5-inch high numbers for the address placement. The wall itself is stone veneer with CMU backup that will sit on a concrete footing. So, can we see the site plan?
Sure.
Location. So the location is down there at the bottom right-hand corner, right on Colts Neck Road. It's angled towards, set back from the curb and curb line, and so it's not going to have a sight line issue, but it's angled so you can see it as best you could from at least the one direction.
Sorry, it's two-sided or one-sided?
One-sided.
One-sided.
So if you're coming from the north?
From the north.
It's pointed at you.
Down from south. It's north, you can see it.
And no lighting?
It's ground lit.
There is ground light. There's
ground lit?
Spotlight for the signs.
Okay.
So is that something?
I didn't see that. Okay.
I think the site lighting was previously approved as part of the
Okay.
lighting package.
And the other 3 signs are the little green and white signs that are
Right, so
directional signs?
Correct. So so there are a couple of wayfinding signs. So you can see, if you stay on the site plan real quick, the garage sign is the one all the way farthest to the left-hand side, and that one is building mounted. There's an elevation. You go to, there's an elevation page that down further. Right.
The one that says 8-foot clearance?
Yep, that one there.
Okay.
So that's just an 8-foot clearance sign that's mounted over to the garage entrance to give the clearance. So no other logo provisions for graphics or anything, just that. And then we have 2 wayfinding signs that are on site. One that directs you to the garage, and then one that's closer into the entrance that points you to the assisted living building, and then the entrance to the independent living building. These are wood signs, painted green with white lettering. No graphics, no logos.
Okay. Nick, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start with the monument sign. I think it looks nice, but the color palette for the actual signage, I think, is the issue I have with this right now. If you could go with a warmer set of colors on there, the white maybe becomes a beige, the blue becomes a warmer blue, I think it would work. I think it's nicely organized signage, but I'm just not crazy about the colors. Kind of with trying to keep with the natural setting of that intersection would be my big concern right now. I'm also not crazy about the numbers mounted on the column. I think that takes away from the look of the monument sign. I don't know if there's a way to incorporate the address into the monument sign or the actual signage panel somehow. And the wayfinding signage, I think is fine. I think it's good for grabbing attention. I would just see more probably elderly sect of people coming to visit there perhaps, and I think that's important to be visible and standing out there like it does. So,
Charlie?
Well, my biggest concern is the logo, the horse head, considering the issue we had with the neighbors up the street, that we were quite concerned with them putting a logo on their sign.
Yeah, but it was a company logo, not a residence logo.
I'm new at this. Is this a...
I think it's a little different than a
That this isn't Atlantic Realty's logo. The equivalent here would be if Atlantic Realty had their logo here as the
Well, that was my only concern. If we're telling these folks no,
like Charter Oaks or, or the South Lake Center with the stork. This is the horse instead of the stork.
Okay. That was my only concern.
Really?
We weren't getting ourselves into trouble for.
I think we're okay. I think that's.
This
Or
was like-
Atlantic Realty, the symbol for Atlantic Realty is not a horse, is it? Just wanted to check on that. Grace?
Yeah, I would agree with Nick, just mainly the white, the panel. You
Is
could
there
make
a
it more
tone that you
natural.
would suggest?
Yes, I'm not, something more natural, closer to the,
Even
veneer.
going, oh, sorry, I'll wait my turn, sorry.
Okay. And I'm not bothered with the address, but if it's not the white being there.
We can match
tone
the
it down.
tones of whatever
Yeah.
the tone is.
That's no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, Nick, Neil?
So on that, I would consider a figure ground reversal and do a dark background with light letters, so that the dark background blends in with the stone and the name of the place pops out, and you don't just get this big white field, because the stone's the pretty stuff, the expensive stuff, and yet the white is about all you can really look at, because it's the background and it's pretty glaring. So if you went like dark brown or a brown color of the stone or a gray color of the stone, and then white or light colored letters to contrast against it. Still be very contrast, very easy to read. I get the, I agree with Nick. I think the signage is, directional signage is appropriate, especially given the way this place is developed. Give a little bit of clue about what these two big buildings are. I also agree that the address numbers, do you have to have them at all? The 2222? I mean, anyone looking for this building is surely going to know that that's what this is, because
I think it's a post office requirement, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
Or the fire department.
Or fire
I
department.
mean, we have tons of apartment complex monument signs that don't have those building numbers, but
This is one building, one address.
yeah, on Colts Neck Road. So I guess my suggestion would be to incorporate it in the sign and/or do it below the sign rather than on the column, horizontally, even if it was on the stone still. It would just be, the way it's on this one column is really, that's not what you want to do design-wise. It's an afterthought. Oh, where do we put the numbers? Let's stick them on there.
Bruce?
Happy with those comments.
Ken?
Absolutely agree with Neil's comments. Are we also commenting on the small directional signs?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I'm not sure what the color palette of the building is. It's been a little while, but for some reason, the color green, I don't know, especially the clearance sign, it's going to be, I understand it needs to be obtrusive in terms of telling people, be careful, but just wondering if there's another way to do that. I just think that green, and I think it's going to be a more of a natural tone for the...
Earthy.
Yeah. If there's a way you could do what Neil is saying in terms of what you're going to conceivably do with the main signage is to, maybe contrast with white letters on something a little more earth tone. That still gives you enough contrast to see the word clearance.
This is the color palette that was approved
Yeah.
almost a few years back. So you can see that it is earthy, but the point of making it a little brighter green was to draw attention to it.
I understand.
Purpose of the
It just looks like it would be placed there, like somebody just, oh my goodness, we forgot to put a clearance sign up there and just went to Home Depot and bought one and put it up there.
It will be going on the brick here.
Yeah.
That is the.
It just, it's not my personal preference, that I would look for a different color, but I wouldn't hold you guys back.
Are we just looking for a different color for the
Yeah,
clearance
it's the
sign
green.
or the?
Well, I think they all need to blend, so it's something to think about, but I don't want to slow things down, but the green just is a turnoff for me.
I guess my general comment, I think the small signs are fine. They do attract your attention. That's what they're supposed to do. Change the background color. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not as opposed to the green. I think all the other comments about the darker background, because it's going to be a pretty sign. My first reaction is a pretty sign. But then, I guess Neil pointed out, all you see is the white when you look at it. So I think that's a good comment. I don't know where you put the numbers. Granted, it's just one building, one number. If there's a place you could put it on the building would almost make as much sense on that corner
And that's possible.
or something like that, and just not have it here at all. Because I like the Hunter Woods at Trail's Edge. That's a very creative, it's just nice, it's a nice sign, so I don't have a problem with any of these, with only the reversal of the sign color, the main sign,
Yeah.
and relocating the 2222.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts?
Can we condition a color now, or are we needing to come back with a whole new color and a whole new presentation?
Good
I mean, we can match the earthier tones with the white. Our neighbors here, Erin, and she's been fully updated on our project. I attend all of their HOA meetings, and so they don't have a concern. But if we want to tie the colors, we're more than happy to do so. It's a good suggestion.
I was going to suggest it go to the next available anything for final approval.
You mean like a con or a panel or?
Well, a panel,
Just so we get the color scheme, I think that's,
not wait a month if we.
He's willing to give us a color scheme.
So we just need to keep in mind that the next available panel meeting will not be for 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, so just want to put that out there.
It'll mid to late June.
Yeah.
I don't like sitting here doing this on the fly. I mean, this is a beautiful sign. You ought to do it right. I mean, yeah, we could say brown and white go, but if you want to do something more creative than that, you need to come back to something. Virtual meeting.
Well, building the monument itself would not be impacted by the color of the aluminum panel on the front, which
Improve
would
location and improve all the other.
What about an electronic vote?
We could do that. I mean, technically, it's not going to open until March of next year, so we got a little bit of time.
Right.
So I make a motion, we approve the signs in concept and ask the applicant restudy their color schemes with, maybe based on the comments. Potentially dark background, lighter letters, more subdued color if used at all.
Well, the letters are our logo, but I think we could shade the background, the white. Is that fair?
No.
Well, you have to be more specific, because I'm sitting there
Electric
going.
blue is not right.
But what are we looking for?
That is our logo.
Yeah, but you can still get your font, you can still get your everything, just, the color is too much. I mean, you put a stone sign up here, then you put electric blue, electric green, and gold on it, and it looks like a high school, pep club sign. So.
We'll tone it.
The blues, this is, that's showing a little brighter than it is, but this is the blue that's, and the gold is a little dull.
I think those are closer to what would be appropriate than what the graphic shows, but I still think they need to be toned, maybe a couple shades, you could get it.
I mean, I'm not sure I wouldn't have a problem if the white became more of I hate the word beige.
I do too.
A medium brown, and then the other colors on top of it, so the background blends in. My biggest objection is the white.
Right. Is the horse head your logo or not?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, if you've got the horse head on there and all this goes to white, it's classy, it's first, I mean, if you're trying to do a first-rate residence here, don't tacky it up with your sign up front. You've still got your logo, you've still got your fonts, it's still recognizable as your brand. It's just a little more elegant than putting all that color up there. So, trust us on
More
this.
specific, are you saying if the white is some other color, Hunter's Woods at Trail's Edge, and the gold line underneath it is all white, and the logo can be the green and gold?
Or the logo stays white too. I mean,
inside the home base thing would remain white with the horse.
I don't want to rebrand your whole brand with my motion. But usually people that have branding have a more neutral option with their color schemes. And if you don't, this might be the time to develop it.
We appreciate your input. So just to understand the size, location, et cetera, but to come back with the more toned, appropriate.
I think that's what you're hearing. I think that's the
And
intent of the
the
motion.
last part of it was that the numbers need to not be on the post, either below the sign or on the building.
There was a second? Did someone second that?
I'll second it.
We also have another item on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a minor in monument sign design, that's why I'm saying.
It's the only course you got a C in.
It's good to be the chair.
Yes. Yeah, there's a motion and a,
Yeah.
we'll get to the next. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. What else were you applying for?
The side.
The which?
We're going from 4-inch to,
Oh, that's not part of the motion?
Siding modification?
Oh. Didn't print that out.
The other
Sorry.
signs get approved?
Yeah, they all got it.
They were
They all
part
got
of
it.
it.
All got it.
Well, they want to be,
All got it.
they want to be considered.
Green
with
ones
the
were.
same.
here we go.
Yeah.
They want to go to.
That's what
a,
he was asking, yeah, from the siding issue.
They want to go to a wider.
Their last thing in the application.
Oh, right, I saw it.
So part of the original approval back in 2016, we did hardy lap siding, cementitious siding. And so we have a combination of stone veneer, brick veneer, and then siding, either lap or
Right.
cementitious panels. It was incorrectly called out as 4-inch exposed materials, which is for a building this size, this much siding. It doesn't scale right. So we want to go to the wider exposed, it'll be a 6-inch exposed material, 7-inch overall, but 6-inch exposed, so 2 inches additional exposure on the siding. Keeping more with the aesthetics, the scaling of the building, the amount of siding. 4 inches is going to make the building look too aesthetic. Yeah, too busy. So it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing to have the wider exposed siding. That is the mock-up that we did of the siding, and you can see how wide that board is. The 4-inch would be too busy on that type of detail. The other thing to note is that the condos directly adjacent have lap siding on their elevations and have, as part of the detail on some of those elevations, they have the wider siding as well. So it would be keeping with the elevations that you see from our building, so it keeps it in harmony there. So we're not changing color or material, it's just purely the
That's
size
fine. That's
of
fine.
the exposure.
Anybody have any questions about that? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the change in siding specifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anything else?
Thank you for your time.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, I got to see it. Couldn't resist. Okay. Somewhere around there I got.
How come we still got people?
There it is.
Do what? How come we still got people?
Groupies, they
Oh, jeez.
they follow Richard everywhere.
Is that what it is? Oh, man.
What?
The new groupies are out there.
What's that?
Wait, wait, wait. He's just giving me a hard time.
So we got business now?
I guess we got.
I think it's down to business.
Okay, now to our favorite part of the agenda, and Anna's favorite part.
I'm thrilled.
This-
I get
she
your attention
loves this.
Before 10 o'clock.
We're not even yawning yet or anything, right?
You're allowed 5 minutes.
It's exciting. So we have resolution 8 on the table.
Dun-dun-dun.
Hopefully push forward.
Would you mind reading it to us?
I actually have it memorized.
I'm sure you do.
Sure.
Just the red parts.
So before, I actually want to preface it with something. So I don't know how many of you know, but Lucy has submitted her resignation.
Boo.
So this resolution becomes even more important now.
I hear you.
So obviously, workflow efficiencies will be more significant to us now. She is with us until June 8th. We are working diligently, ferociously, I should say, to find a replacement, which will not be easy since she's been with us for so long. But probably there will be a bit of time, probably in June, possibly the month after, where we will have to delete a panel to we will not have enough people to do meetings, but hopefully that timeframe will be very short. But anyway, so I'm prefacing that because obviously there's processes in this resolution that kind of go to staffing, so just saying. But anyway, so hopefully everybody's had a chance. The last comment that Bruce noted in terms of the rewrite of the one comment on was it was section 2, paragraph D. DRB delegates to staff the authority to disapprove applications that do not comply with the design guidelines or cluster standards, provided no one has registered as an affected party, and applicants may exercise their right to appeal staff's decision. That was the last comment that came through, and so that's been incorporated in this rewrite. And then I also, since it came up tonight, I also want to mention that one of the big things that was incorporated in this resolution was the fact that we did not have the appeal process spelled out anywhere, and this kind of identifies the process step by step. So in terms of like if somebody presents an appeal to the DRB, it has to stay within the full DRB. It cannot go back to a panel. That kind of came up here in one of the appeals. But at least this identifies the step-by-step process for members, because we did not have it in any other resolution. So any other comments or questions that we need to address in this?
I just had one question on the last page before number 9, where it says, in the case of a tie vote on an appeal, I just want to make sure it's clear that that's a full board tie vote, not a panel. Like if
Well, a tie panel, a tie vote in the full board, yes.
we should just make sure.
Yeah.
Do we need to insert that there? I mean, or not? Just say in the case of a tie vote at a full board appeal.
Yeah, we can throw an answer that.
I don't think it's necessary.
I guess all appeals go to the full board anyway, right?
Right,
So
all
it's
appeals
implied.
go.
Okay, then forget it. Okay.
Why did you bring it up?
But I just read that and I said, you know that, well, we used to have appeals all over the place, you know. Anyway, okay, fine.
But I, to your point, isn't 7 say when reviewing appeals, panel or the full board shall determine? So it suggests there is an appeal from that a panel would hear.
There is
That's number 7, because
The panels review appeals from consultation.
right,
consultation.
from consultation, that's right.
Well, that was the point, but that was your point for number 9, that it should clarify that
Differentiate.
That is the full board
the
does.
full board appeal
yeah.
goes to the board. So
So it is important.
it would be relevant, because there's two kinds of, two,
Right, a panel appeal would only come to the full board. Right.
As long as that's clear, then.
Again, I mean, the only appeal that would be appealable to the board of directors would be a full DRB. So again, I don't necessarily think you need it, but I like clear documents. So if the board would like that in there, I have nothing against it.
I mean, all the language that was inserted here really came from the deed, so that's why it's written
Yeah.
that way, but we can certainly insert that.
I guess I think it's clear enough. No.
Again, with it being that only an appeal from the full board is appealable to the board of
Right.
directors,
Right.
I think that the second part certainly give it direction.
Yeah, and I think you clarified Bruce's concern that panels do, and that comes in here somewhere else, that they're doing consultation appeals, and that's legit, so okay. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
I was only going to approve this if Lucy was still working here, so.
Oh, that's in here.
Well, so you better hurry and approve it.
That's 3C.9. Thou shalt not resign.
And or train up your replacement before leaving.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Exactly. Okay, I think, any other comments on this? Are we done?
Do a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 8. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands.
Just to be clear, huh?
To be clear, okay.
Got a lot of
Unanimous.
hands.
There you go.
Congratulations.
We're gonna have this, we're gonna have this framed and hung in the men's room.
The second item I wanted to bring up, and this is not asking for approval, it's just to get feedback.
She knows better.
Richard and I discussed this, and we thought we would bring it to the board. We've had issues, I wouldn't say issues, but just to bring to your attention, we oftentimes have, obviously, as I'm sure you know, application, that was conversation tonight, it's kind of ironic. Obviously, applications that come for review that are generated from POAs, so it's for existing conditions, and someone is waiting on the approval of that application to go to settlement. So those are the applications that are sensitive in nature in terms of expediency and getting the approval. And so I was talking to Richard about, you know, what could we do in terms of expediting those approvals? Because obviously somebody's waiting, you know, to go to settlement. Obviously, it doesn't excuse the fact that that person should have asked for permission instead of forgiveness. So it doesn't make it right. However, part of the, you know, the thing that I want to be sensitive about is that the majority of these people aren't really selling and getting out of Reston. They're selling but still buying into Reston. So they remain members. So I want to be able to be sensitive to the fact that we're still going to be working with those members. So I don't want to sever that relationship. In some cases, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do in terms of we see that existing condition and it's egregious and we know that, you know, obviously if it was being submitted as a new application, it most likely wouldn't be approved. So it has to go through as, you know, being reviewed by a panel or whatnot. But if it's something that's, you know, we know it's going to be approved, could be a quick approval, what are your thoughts about what could we do in terms of getting that pushed through as a quicker approval? So again, you know, I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I just think that, you know, we do get quite a few of these applications, and I just think we should think about, you know, how do we, you know, get a quicker review of these applications.
Well, some of the things that we've changed and thrown to staff to approve anyway, will that help do kind of what we're talking about?
Sure, but
There's a lot of stuff you can approve already.
Yeah, right. And I just, you know, again, I don't want to. I want to be, you know, courteous of the fact that, you know, there are existing conditions. So, you know, technically, they should go to the DRB, obviously. But
Yeah, it's some of the more difficult, sensitive stuff in my, you know, as soon as you say POA, you know, why are we, I mean, you can almost tell before you even look, oh, this must be a POA. And they can be really significant and really difficult and long existing, and the pressure being brought to bear on us, and I know on you too, is so extreme sometimes. All of this, oh, we need to have this done because we're going to closing, and I appreciate all that, but to me, that's one of the reasons it goes to the weightiness of the panel or the board versus staff. Certainly stuff, and if you wanted to draft a list of the stuff in a POA situation, although I agree with Richard, it feels like it would be the same things that are on the staff approvable list already. The two thoughts you have are, one, oh, this is a POA, oh, this has a lot of stuff in it, this is a little difficult. And then right after that, there's we finally have a chance to clean this property up a little bit. And so I think it's one of the most important things we do in terms of properties that have kind of fallen off the charts and have a lot of things that need to be brought up to speed. So I don't want to lose any of the institutional ability to bring things up to snuff.
No, I agree. And
It's leverage. It's our most extreme leverage that we have.
I totally agree. And I mean, and I really don't think we should look away or make things easier in terms of people that come in for approval after the fact. And I mean, if there's one thing that, you know, I'm hoping sooner than later that the new board will look at, updating the deed. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about so many things that need to be updated in the deed. One of the things that I think we should consider is that maybe things like that are, maybe the member is charged a fine for submitting an application or submitting after the fact. Because I think maybe that would discourage people from,
Have to pay
making modifications and then coming in for approval. I'm
It's-
not saying that that's the answer, but,
There may be several, I think all of the suggestions probably might need to come together. It might be a bundle of ideas that might help in this, but it's almost two things. There's an 80-20 rule. So the majority of the POAs, are they clean, uneventful, they get done, or are 80% of these problematic ones?
most of the POAs I wouldn't say are clean. But I would say that most of them are not necessarily problematic, but you do have, I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was like a big retaining wall at one point that got submitted that, but there could be an addition or something like that, and that's not something that we would automatically, that wouldn't be a staff approval.
That's a good point. The other, I've bought and sold 4 times now in Reston, so I am one of those people that keeps bouncing around, trying on something new here. And I've worked with a few real estate agents. I think some of us know some of them, but I've had 4 different ones. And those that knew, as soon as we had the discussion about putting the place up for sale, that was the first thing that was brought to my attention, and I was naive back then. This is before I even got onto the Reston board. I remember the first house I sold, the team sat me down and said, "Here's what we need to do, Ken." And that was back in the 90s. So
Well, if you made those applications all along.
Yeah. Well, is there, my long-winded point, we were educating the agents. We had agents days and so forth. And I would say the majority of the people here probably sell with agents that know Reston or even live in Reston, is to get them to really inform their clients before they become a client.
So we
POA is
want to
the
be able
most
to do that.
important
It's been
part.
part of the conversation that we want to do more of that, and definitely get the information out there. But I speak with a contractor that does a lot of work with us, and I can't tell you how many times he hears people that it's not even just POA related. I'll just say, he knows our process, very intimately, and he'll just, somebody comes to him and wants to do, window replacements or whatever the case may be, and he says, well, I have applications in the back of my truck because I know what the rest of the process is. And then, he explains it to them, and then they were like, well, I don't want to take all that time, I'll just do it and then deal with, the process later. And he says, well, I think you need to go through the process because it's better to go through the process first.
Understood.
And some people just don't want to do it. So I agree with you, and I think we are starting to take steps to want to do the education, but I think
Sounds
we're
like that's
still,
not enough, though. Yeah.
And I think the market picking up is also causing the fact that the houses are, selling quickly.
I just know this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue here because I think the churn in Reston is just going to get to be a bigger and bigger and bigger number in terms of turnover of homes.
Yeah. So anyway, we don't have to solve the problem here.
To
but
think
I
about it,
think
the one thing that struck me that Anna was telling me, I did not know this, but these poor, overworked staff people are doing up as many as 150 POAs a month. Now think about that, and they still have time to deal with all the stuff we deal with.
Right.
And that's part of what started this conversation is, well, what can we do to make that a little bit easier, or quicker, not easier? And that's what we're all should be thinking about, because I don't know how many staff people it would take to do 150 of these things and do the inspections, do this, write it up, decide where it goes,
Well, believe it or not, it's actually 2 right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Have they started to use the new rules, if you will, for what the staff can approve? Has that been initiated?
Well, no, because we have to take it to.
Got to go to the board.
Board of Public
I was
Committee.
just curious if it was having any, if there was a noticeable.
No, because we're going to the June BOC, and then from there, we'll go to, well, for the guideline edits, it'll go through a hearing process. And then, so I'm assuming that probably would be a July implementation. And then
If you're
I'm
lucky.
hoping, well, and I'm hoping that, well, I don't think we'll get any pushback from the board because they know how important it is to get this process through. But I'm hoping one of the things we've talked to the board officers about is kind of getting processes just kind of streamlined. And I think maybe the hearing process, just getting that a little bit, more efficient. So maybe that can be more quick in the future. Because sometimes, every time we go through, I mean, this was needed, but I think we need to be looking at the guidelines, more regularly, so we don't do guideline edits in bulk.
Yeah.
And we should take, I think, like we did in the past where we looked at, I can't remember what it was trellis or something like that. Like, I think we should make it a point to look at 2 or 3 a quarter or 2 or 3 every 6 months so that we're keeping up with the guideline edits to see what changes.
Yeah.
It's easier than trying to do, 100.
Right.
So.
I think they seriously need to do something penalty-wise to encourage people to do an application rather than say, oh, I don't care, I'll let them catch me. I hear it from my neighbors all the time. Not all of them, mind you, but there are a few who have lived here for 40 years. And, it's not
I
like
want to be
they're...
sensitive to fees.
It's not like they're new and they really didn't know the rules, They're just boneheaded.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to bring up. I think it can be.
Two other things I just wanted to raise a question of and for everyone to think about.
Please.
Oh, wait. Oh. No, it used to be way back in the dark ages when Neil and I first started doing this. The guideline process was something that the DRB did. We did our own guidelines. We held our own public hearing. That was the end of it. Then we would report to the RA board what had happened. And I guess they got to vote on it. But basically, we did our own shtick. That's what we did. And I want everybody to think about it. I would suggest that we perhaps go back to the board. We used to do that. We have to hold our own public hearing. At the public hearing, in my experience, every time we did it for about the first 10 years I was on the board, one time we had one person come and talk about fire retardant shingles or something like that. And that was it. So it's not like you get a huge public outcry over us revising guidelines. So it just, somewhere back in there, about 10 years ago, it got flipped to where now the RA board does this. As much as I adore everyone on the RA board, they don't know our guidelines. They don't know why we're changing stuff, right? And not criticizing them. They just don't know. And it just seemed to be an unnecessary step to do that. If all of us who do this every week, we know what we're talking about. And we've gone there and we've had some wordsmithing and stuff, but just particularly now I'm chair again, I got to go to the board and do all this stuff again. I'm trying to avoid doing that because it's just kind of unnecessary. So think about that. This is one thing. Okay, and the second thing was, in terms of how we run the meetings, it's important, I think, that we keep order and I try to give everybody a chance to talk, but I think we have to be a little careful about breaking off into individual conversations with an applicant because it throws everyone else off. I try to give everybody a chance to talk. So if you got a question, write it down, and when it's your turn, ask it. It's better than all of a sudden we got side conversations going everywhere. And that happened a couple of times tonight. I think it's distracting because then the applicant is like, oh, who should I be listening to? So I just think let's think about that. So I'll do the best I can to give everybody a shot at it. You'll get a chance to talk. So got a question, write it down. Don't blurt it out.
Please don't speak on behalf of the board members yourself, Mr. Chair.
Never do that.
Yes, you do.
No, I know. Okay, that's it. Anything else anyone wants to say? Motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
There's a motion. Second? I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is he allowed to second?
You can do anything.
Good luck.
Oh, he's the chairman.
He needs a gavel.
No, he doesn't.